I call the meeting to order. If everybody could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And this brings us to our public comment portion at the meeting. On agenda items only, it's not on agenda items only because these are interviews. So if you'd like to make a comment, please come forward. Okay. Let me bring in our first candidate. So I want to welcome the community members. Thank everyone for taking the time to join us for the first round of interviews, or second round of interviews. First round for these people. Second night for us. Tecumseh Superintendent Search. Please note that all members of the audience who wish to participate to provide feedback may be complete an interview intake form over here. The forms are on the table, and after you complete them, will be copied and distributed to all board members. Also, all board members will be asking questions tonight. Now we will proceed to our first interview.
Nice to meet you, sir. Thank you. John, that's it. Jim Baker, nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi,
We'll move this under.
Suzanne Moore. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Sir, nice to meet you. Hi, sir. Nice to meet you. Here you go.
Well, welcome, Jim. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
All board members will be asking questions today in a round robin format. We're going to start with myself here. So just let me know when you're ready to get going here.
I am going to start the clock. We have 60 minutes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you,
Yep.
sir.
Yep.
I'll keep track of it. Try not to. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Please summarize why you believe you would be an effective superintendent for Tecumseh Public Schools. We are looking to hear about the specific preparation you have engaged in to become an effective superintendent. This could include things like education, certification, professional development, and work experiences in similar circumstances.
Sure. Thank you. I want to first thank each of you for having me in. It's an honor to be here tonight, especially on a Friday night. I appreciate the dedication. I'm sorry that it's the Adrian game. I know that's a big one. We appreciate that. And I wanted to thank those in the audience for being here tonight. I think that's even more of a telling sign of this community and the support. I appreciate that and having me in tonight. Before I continue, I want to let you know that the packet I gave you, if you have a chance to look at it, it has, besides my resume, it has my philosophy and my background, the innovations that we have put forward as school districts and that I've led. It has my letters of reference, and it has the other information, as well as my entry plan, if you're able to give that a chance to look at it. I believe that my diverse background and training is unique in the world of superintendents. Early in my career, I went through the police academy when I was 20, and for the first 10 years of my life, I was a police officer, firefighter, paramedic, served in various roles in that capacity. And as a young, probably too young to be a police officer, quite frankly, service-oriented professional, I learned in many different situations that the backbone of success is truly in trust, respect, collaboration, and the ability to listen, because everybody has input, everybody has an opinion, and no matter what your title is, no matter what your background is, you need to be able to accept that input and then be open-minded about what you've received. I went from school resource officer, school liaison officer, back on to midnights as a police officer, so I could go back to school full-time to do my teaching certifications, and received my certifications at the age of 30, started teaching for the next 4 years in social studies and English. Once I reached that tenure, I reached tenure on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, I was hired as an assistant principal, and then started my my administrative career. And I hope tonight, while we're talking, that we're able to go over my administrative background and the steps and why I've made the decisions that I've made and that have led me here today. At every stage of my career, I've moved in a progressive manner for various reasons. I've never lost sight of the fact that we're here for kids, we're here for community. What really matters is achievement and what we give our students. We are here as a community. I think a school district should be the center of the community, and I'll share what I have found when I've been researching Tecumseh and what I did to get that information. I have both my master's and my ed specialist in educational leadership, both from Wayne State University. I have been the superintendent of Huron Valley Schools for 4 years. I was brought to their district as the HR director, and then they asked if I would become the interim superintendent, and then I was named sitting superintendent. And I have the Detroit experience, and I'm currently in Battle Creek Lakeview as the assistant superintendent. All of those districts are extremely diverse, and I believe the diverse experiences and that background is truly what makes me a candidate that should be qualified for Tecumseh and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Secretary Johnson, and then we will proceed in order.
Could you please provide an example of a time you established a vision of success? Describe the process that was used, who was involved in the process, and why. And what was your approach to implementation?
The circumstance that comes to mind, the scenario that comes to mind, is when I was the assistant superintendent of HR with Huron Valley Schools. Had been there maybe 4 months, 5 months. We were going through a redistricting process. We had declining enrollment. We knew that we were facilities rich in regards to square footage. We had to take a look. The district had decided prior to my arrival that they were going to use an outside facilitator to work with the parent groups and to take them through the process. The outside facilitator was not received very well. Didn't match with the parents, didn't match with the community, and it was obvious that we needed to go a different route. The superintendent asked if I would take on that process and take on that not proceedings, but those meetings, so that we could start moving the district forward. So I did that. We put forward a very transparent agenda. We made sure that we had multiple community meetings. We made sure that everything was posted both on our website and in our buildings and through every department. if there are any additional questions that were going between the meetings. We held meetings weekly. So all in all, we probably had 18 meetings. Some of them were contentious, and no one wants to give up neighborhood schools, and we made sure that any data that was asked for, we posted, we put it out. We made sure that we involved every community group. We made sure that our unions were involved in the facts of what was going on. We answered every question, but we made sure that when we answered a question, we just didn't put it to, let's say that it was a elementary parent group. We didn't just put it on their site and within their hands. We made sure we put it out district-wide to all groups. If we ever missed a group or a new group popped up, we added them to the communication process so that everyone was getting the totality of the information. And at the end of the process, unfortunately, we had to close the middle school. We had to close a elementary building. We repurposed and redid our early childhood center, and we were able to get through that. And at the end, when we polled our constituents, our stakeholders, our parents felt that when the questions were asked, were we supported, were we communicated with, did we feel that the process was fair? Overwhelmingly, we had good grades on that. Not everyone liked the results because that's very personal in nature. Those are hard decisions, but we involved the right people. We were honest, we were transparent, we were vigorous. We made sure we went back and triple and quadruple checked and made sure that everyone was being answered. And we just did a lot of communicating. I am an over communicator, and I make sure that everyone is getting all information. Nothing worse than Sunday night at 2 a.m. you sit up in bed and said, I should have communicated with this person, I forgot, things like that. I believe in communication and transparency. So, thank you.
Share an experience that illustrates your capacity to work collaboratively to affect positive change.
While superintendent at Huron Valley, we had to do a deep dig into the data as far as our student achievement. And quite frankly, we leaned on being able to say publicly that we outperformed the county and the state. And the real question came is when we dug down and said, how are we performing against like schools? Schools that are our size, receiving the same per pupil. Schools that were similar to ourselves. And the truth of the matter is that we weren't performing where we should perform. And the data showed that. So what we had to do, the right thing to do as superintendent is I reformatted our instructional department. We took a system that had been there for a long time, somewhat archaic, and we rebuilt our teaching and learning department, and we really used our inner tools in regards to those people with the most strength, which is our teaching staff, our teacher leaders, our PLC leaders, our district chairs. We knew that they had the answers to help us move a curriculum forward, curriculum reconfiguration forward. And we changed the management style, we changed our delivery, we identified master teachers in each of our core content areas, and we provided FTE for them to be out of the classroom and in with our curriculum department, redeveloping instructional goals, rewriting instructional goals, matching up to benchmarks and standards, the Michigan state standards. And we went through every core curriculum, and then when we were done with the core curriculums, we went after the specials. We wanted to make sure that arts and our arts, our performing arts, our visual arts were also being met. And so we took a deputy superintendent model that had been in place 25 or 30 years, and I put in a director of elementary ed, I put in a director of secondary ed. And then we used like I said, our inner strength. Our inner strength is really our master teachers. We put them into the process, and then when we had redeveloped that curriculum, those master teachers then were district-wide in those core curriculum classrooms where they were master teachers, working with those core content cohorts. So our person who was a master math teacher and had just rewritten over 18 months the math curriculum was in K-12 math classrooms with his or her peers, helping them to get through the new curriculum, the new alignments. Extremely powerful when you let your people who have the best knowledge, our teachers who are master teachers, very powerful when you let them own the process and you let them drive the process. Their peers respect them, their peers know them, it's not an I gotcha. We laid out the timetable, the plan, and it went extremely well. It went very, very well.
Tell us about an unpopular decision you've made.
Just one?
Other than with your family.
Fair enough. A unpopular, a tough decision was in my 4th year as superintendent at Huron Valley. We were part of a very large athletic league, one of the mega leagues. And what we were finding that our high schools with declining enrollment, we were often playing much larger schools, much more competitive. They could put a lot more athletes out on the court or the floor. We started to work with neighboring districts that also had common size schools as what we did. And we took a look at student population, we took a look at injuries, we took a look at people who were not participating because they were, quite frankly, they were getting burned out from playing only larger competitive schools. And we, within about an 8-month time, we convinced 5 districts, 9 schools, and formed a new league based on size, based on fairness, based on equity of our student athletes. The league is up, it's still going, it's going strong. It was the right thing to do for kids, flat out. It wasn't fair that Lakeland or Milford High School, you know, at 1,200, 1,300, we're playing the Grand Blancs and the Brightons and the Northvilles, you know, that had 3,200, 3,400 kids. We had a ton of injuries. The parents were upset. We tightened in the travel time. We had a much better budget. We rolled in student government. We rolled in philanthropic events for our kids, our student athletes. It was a win. It was a win for those communities, and it's a great league, going strong. I think they're going to go from 10 to 12 here in the next year or so. Very proud of that. It's the right thing to do for kids.
Regarding curriculum, who drives curriculum? How would you organize the district in a way that maximizes student performance and potential?
Can I have the last part again, please? I'm sorry.
How would you organize the district in a way that maximizes students' performance and potential?
The driver of the curriculum, the driver is we as a school district. I believe that the superintendent, while he has direct input, makes sure that the process is being followed in regards to what that curriculum looks like, what that alignment looks like. The reality is that the culture and climate of the school district, what has taken place in the past, what has been identified where it needs to go is what drives it. The process that is used, I believe, should be driven by your instructional leaders as far as building principals and administration. I believe that the lead principal in each building should be the instructional leader of that building, and then within their, a lot of districts call them school improvement teams, or some schools, school relationship teams. We have to make sure then that the alignment of that process within that building through the building principal involves those teachers, obviously. We need to make sure that parents are aware. We need to make sure that the board is aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it. It should always be based on best practice. This can't be something that is fly by night. We need to make sure that this has been identified through best practice. You know, often We question how did this come about? Why did it come about? I am used to a model that includes the ISD in regards to what has taken place as far as that county and those districts that are around Tecumseh. I think that we have a unique opportunity in this school district to move people forward as far as the instruction and curriculum model in regards to being progressive in nature. I know there's been a lot of conversation about different instructional models and what's right and what's wrong. At the end of the day, while you involve everybody, you communicate, you make sure that it is lined, it needs to be based on best practice. It needs to be, we need to be able to show people why we landed where we landed, which means if we're going to change it, if we're going to do wholesale changes, we need to make sure we're being clear of the why, and we need to make sure we're being clear of where we're trying to get. Again, I don't think school districts change to just change. I think school districts change because there's a need. But if we don't identify and communicate the need, then we're going to run into hurdles. So at the end of the day, we all own it. We all stand by it. Ultimately, the buck stops at the superintendent. The superintendent has to own it, has to be able to explain it, has to be able to process it. But that shouldn't ever mean that the superintendent should feel out there on an island on his own, because if we follow those other steps that I just put out there, everyone should already know why we're doing, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. None of it should be a surprise. We need to be transparent, over-communicate, honest, and we need to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So superintendent leads every effort in the school district, has to be responsible for every effort, but the superintendent should never be acting out there on an island or on his own in regards to any initiative or any forward motion, as long as we're doing it for the right reasons.
Thank you.
My turn.
Your turn.
Tell us about your impact on student achievement in your most recent position. Please describe the situation, the task, what actions you took, and the outcome. Please include specifics about student achievement data.
In my current role as the assistant soup at Battle Creek Lakeview, because that is HR, it is my responsibility to make sure that we are hiring and putting in place the best educators that are out there. We've had some turnover. We've had to go out and we've had to expand our collective bargaining agreement with the union to allow us to find in those critical shortage areas and to find master teachers, which means we've had to pay some steps. I say all of that going back to student achievement because in Battle Creek we were noticing a dip in the academic achievement of two of our subgroups in our district. We have a large number of Burmese students in Battle Creek Lakeview. About 13% of our student population is Burmese. In the Burmese population, our students were having a tough time with our core curriculum, with the Michigan standards. We pulled that in to our district, meaning that we had to go out and we need to find Burmese teachers, Burmese parapros, Burmese support persons who can be in our buildings, because our students, while they are extremely hardworking, it's tough for them with their language barriers. They're here in our country, and they're here in Michigan for sometimes 3 or 4 years, and they don't have that background knowledge and that achievement. So we've had to go out and we've had to work with the Kellogg Foundation. We've had to work with the Burma Center. We've had to work with various organizations to make sure we were helping them to understand what resources we needed specific to our school population. We now have a Burmese parent liaison in place that we use heavily to help us with the academic piece when we are sitting down. And it's not just translation. Our students understand what they need to do and where they need to go. They're just that sometimes they're hurting for a little bit of support materials. So we've been able to work with them, and then we sit down with our master teachers in Battle Creek Lakeview to make sure that part of our overall academic plan wraps up those student achievement pieces. For our Burmese students is just one group. Our African American students is another group that we put in a parent liaison, and we have made sure that we are pulling those scores for any of our subgroups, making sure we're getting resources and tools and the persons in place to make sure they're supported in their needs. So what we do, and this is my latest position, is we pull out the data. The superintendent and I sit and we go through with our curriculum team as part of best practice. We identify what those needs are for those groups that are suffering the most, where our gaps are. Pretty easy to identify because they stick out pretty well. And then we make sure that we are putting the persons in place, meaning the resources, so that they can succeed. And we've seen those scores coming up. We're seeing that they're much more acclimated to the school setting. Some of it is cultural in nature. Most of it is just they just need help understanding the academic piece of this. Again, hardworking, very intelligent students. They just need help with the student achievement piece once we identify it. So we make sure the right resources are put in place for student achievement and to make sure that our data is aligned.
Share an experience that reflects your views and leadership approach as it relates to employee morale.
When about 2010 Huron Valley, when I was working HR, I'm sure many of you remember 2010, 12, 13. It was tough times in Michigan. We were one of those school districts. Huron Valley was slated and was on a student enrollment rise about 2007, 2008 to get up to 12,000 students. When the recession hit in 2010, we started to plummet as families had to move, and then we were falling down into 9,200, 8,800, about 4,000 less, about 3,800 less than where we thought we were going to be. When you looked at the per pupil and those types of losses, obviously, we are experiencing huge chunks of funding that we were losing because of the enrollment numbers. We knew going in that we had to find a way to save $3.8 million. And we put processes in place, starting with central office, where we went into concessionary bargaining. And we had to sit with all 13 of our groups, whether they were union groups or whether they were handbook groups or at-will agreements, and we had to let people know why we were about to go down the road we were going to go. Because it was literally either we sat and we developed tactics and we came up with a way to literally save the district, or we were looking at, were we going to close another middle school? Were we going to close 2 more elementaries? Were we going to combine high schools? Huron Valley is a very large district, about 118 square miles, and taking those 2 districts and putting them together was daunting, and quite frankly, it was not very popular. So we sat down and we started going through, and I will tell you, we would work 18, 20-hour days. We would draw up every schematic that you could think of between wages and benefits and insurances and prescriptions and drug cards, and what were we going to do. And I give the Board of Ed a lot of credit during this time. These were not easy. I mean, these are very strong unions. They understood why we were doing it, but they had questions. So I go back to what I shared earlier: over-communicated, transparent. Anything they needed to see from our business office, we provided. We provided it for the community. We made sure that they understand why the dollars were needed, what the real amounts were needed to survive. And we put together a 4-year package, and it was a 7% savings, an 8%, a 6% in the 3rd year, and then back to an 8% of a concession. And I'm very proud that the leaders, our leaders of our district, our teachers, our EA group, they came forward and they did that first as a union. They recognized what needed to be done to survive. Central office, along with administrative groups, hand in hand with our teachers, took the same concessions. It was tough. We were able to then, 3-4 years later, go back and start giving back 1% at a time, but you never really catch up because that's a huge chunk of a concession. But to their credit, to the credit of our staffs, quite frankly, those teachers, parapros, secretaries, bus drivers, everyone took those same cuts. And it was hard, it was painful, but the only way we did it was because we all did it. And we did it for the right reason, so.
Please provide an example of a time you strongly disagreed with a decision of the board, how you handled it, and what was the outcome.
When I was superintendent, we had to come to some tough decisions how we were going to handle an alignment of the board and how we're going to handle some, quite frankly, in Huron Valley, we had a little bit of a shift in the board. We had 3 new members come on, and there started to be some questions about transparency. And this was starting to bubble up through the board, and our board was becoming a little bit fractured. So we came up with the agreement that we were going to start, not only would we do our committee meetings, and we had a number of committees where 3 board members would be present, if they could all be there, myself, and then whoever was in charge of that division would meet. And we made sure that the agreement was every communication, all of the minutes, anything that came out of that meeting was going to come to our next board meeting. Some people call it a committee of the whole. We were running under that model, but we were actually using more of a first reading, first introduction type of a model. It was risky because that community and that board traditionally was not used to putting out everything from those minutes, making sure that everything was posted, making sure that, quite frankly, all of the other board members had that same information. They operated under, for example, the finance committee had met, 3 board members had been in on the conversation, superintendent included that in board notes. That was okay. If there was any questions, go forward with that. Because of the fracture, and quite frankly, there was a little bit of a trust issue, they wanted to see more than that. And I'm glad that's where they landed. It was tough. We had to bring in MASB, we had to do governance, we had to go through the workshop so everybody was on the same page. But at the end of the day, because we were being honest with each other, because we were able to show that this isn't an I gotcha, we're not looking to get anybody, we were trying to improve that process, and it was the right process for the board. The board went from some of those issues, the board went to then becoming a much more cohesive unit, much more transparent in how they communicated with each other. We were able to start taking on much larger issues in that school district that were necessary to move forward on it. And once again, I'll go back to what I started with. Once you have relationships built on trust, once people understand where you're coming from, then it becomes much more of a norm, and it was a much better setting for that school board. And I give them credit. They recognized it. It wasn't easy. They didn't like it when I brought it up to them as superintendent. We need to go down a better road. We need to go down a better path. But it was the right thing to do, and we were able to set best practice going forward for when new members came on, and how we introduced them and how we brought them aboard, how we onboarded new board members. All of that was rolled in as we also developed board goals. We were able to really identify the function of the board, what they were doing as a governing entity, what their goals were, what the cadence was. And so there was a lot of good work that came out of those initiatives.
please share an experience with us that helps us understand your approach to using data and sharing data with key stakeholders?
In Huron Valley, I will go back to the experience that I've shared a little bit about when we realized literally that our curriculum had not been aligned in about 22 years. And as HR person when I came on, I would not have necessarily realized that because it wouldn't have been within my domain. I was working on the other issues that I have described when we had to come up with the bargaining issues and make sure that we remained solvent. But we had not aligned curriculum, like I said, in 22 years. We were continuing to move forward, relying on the fact that we were outperforming the county and the state, but when we were going to be honest with ourselves, we should have been outperforming the county and the state. That wasn't a good enough measure. So we did a very deep data dig. We dug into every single curriculum, every alignment, every standard, and we realigned every curriculum within that school district. And it wasn't a popular decision. You're going from a status quo that had always been good enough for that school district to move forward because we continued to outperform the county and the state, but we really weren't performing where we should. And that's hard. That's hard when you say that to a group of administrators, teachers, parents, students. When you're sitting with a student advisory committee that I met with as a superintendent and taking them through the data, it's not fair to have that data and not put it out there so your student leaders understood it as well. And so then the question came, why and how? So we had to go back and we had to repair that. And when you take a chance, when you go out and you take these data digs and you find something that needs to be repaired and fixed and you put a plan in place, you need to be able to also explain the how and the why and what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that was part of the series of best practice audits that I put in place because, quite frankly, I didn't have a good answer for why that had not been done before. I was happy we found it when we found it. I was happy we were strong enough to be honest. I'm happy that we were able to put a plan in place and we now have aligned curriculum in Huron Valley that I think is doing a much better job for kids in the community, the right job for kids.
Tell us about a time you were able to bring people together who previously had significant differences of opinion.
The first thing that comes to mind goes back to actually when I was principal at Lamphere High School. We had two very diverse groups in that student population in that community. We had a very large Arab community and we had a growing African American community. And traditionally, those two groups of students and families have some issues getting along. And we knew that this was going to continue to be a problem. So we pulled in parents, clergy, students, coaches. We made sure that both of those student populations and both those cultures were represented in those fields. We had coaches and we want to make sure clergy was part of this and would explain to us what the issues were. We did our best to make sure that we were hiring persons of those cultures into our school district, even though, quite frankly, in this part of the region, the state, there are not a lot of African American teachers, and there are not a lot of Lebanese Arabic teachers. You have to start partnerships with U of M Dearborn, for example, and let them know what we're doing. And we were able to start bringing in parents who were working as parapros to help us with these efforts. The Student Advisory Council was huge. We put leaders of those groups together, and we started problem solving what we're going to do in our school district to start alleviating these issues. And when we really sat them down and made sure that we were doing this in a forthright manner, they were They were very accepting. I think they were happy to be going through it because, quite frankly, they were scared sometimes. We had a lot of those issues, and so we just took in the difference of opinion. You know, what are we going to do to make sure our kids are safe? What are we going to do to make sure our students understand diversity and equity and multiple cultures? What are we going to do to make sure their parents understand? Because in that community, those were long holded parts of that family, and that was deep in their culture and their religion. And we had to start fixing that. We put in peer mentoring. We put in where our seniors and our juniors were sponsoring ninth grade students when they came in. We did the link crew efforts. We did anything we could to pull that community together, and we were able to make some vast improvements. And simply by working hard, putting in the hours, and making sure students, parents knew where we were going. They were very dubious at first about where we were going with it, but it was the right thing to do for our school, for those kids, and especially for that community.
Please describe what a visible and accessible superintendent looks like from your perspective.
Again, please, if you're able to, I know how busy you are, if you take some time to look at the materials. Rebecca Walsh, one of the letters that is in my packet, who was board president at the time, I believe states that even though it's not possible, it seems like Jim is at everything, and I believe the superintendent needs to be at everything. Not just the popular events, not just the big events. I'm talking about everything that a person can be at. I believe the superintendent should be at. That includes community events, that includes regional events. I believe a superintendent should be representing his school at the ISD level. I believe at the state level. This morning we were up early and coming back from MASA because I believe in that professional development for superintendents. You need to be present. You need to be wearing orange and black, maybe dark gray. You need to be at everything that you can be. And while I will wear a suit, I'd much rather be in a vest in black and orange and something, because I have found no matter where you are, if you're wearing something that says Tecumseh on it, somebody knows somebody and they ask who you are, where you're from, why are you wearing that? My grandchild used to go there, my aunt is over there. It opens up communication, it shows pride. I think that we need to be the ambassadors for a community. I think we need to be out there. We need to be proud of who we work for. And I think the superintendent needs to be leading the charge and being at anything that he's asked to be at. And not when there's nights or afternoons, when there's 3 or 4 things going, you do 25 minutes here, you go over to the next one, and you make sure that you're there. You make sure that you're answering questions. And the other thing that I have found is when you're there and you are leaning up against the fence at a football game and someone comes up because they have a question, if you're able to get them an answer within 72 hours and you're able to get back to them on Monday to say, here's what I researched over the weekend, here's what we're going to do, or I haven't found it yet, here's what I will get for you. I think that goes a long way in relationships and what the district should be expecting out of a superintendent to represent that school or district.
How have you invested in the communities you have worked in, and how would you invest in this community?
I thank you for the question. I believe where we were just talking is a good launching pad. We're in a unique situation as a family. My wife is superintendent of the South Lyon schools. So to say that we are at a lot of community events in a lot of different districts, we are. And we do it as a couple when we can. We go to her events, we go to my events as well. We make sure that we can be wherever we can be, and then often we have to conquer and divide just because there's so much going on. But I think the best, you'll find this with me, and I hope as your superintendent you'll appreciate it. I'm extremely open. I'm a relationship person. I believe that relationships and letting people know who you are is extremely important. You know, we have 4 children. Our kids are amazing young adults, 2 of which are middle school math teachers. I want people to know who our family is. I want them to know the Bakers. I'm proud of what we do, and I'm proud of the community that I work for. I think you invest. I think you show an interest. I think you learn the history. I mentioned it earlier. The culture and climate of this school district is already here. It's always evolving. It's always changing. It may be shifting, but the DNA is deeply entrenched. As a new superintendent, you do not come in and think you're going to change a culture. You are going to learn that culture. You are going to become a part of the culture. You may put your unique twist on it as in regards to what you're going to do and how you're going to represent that school district, but it will only be to augment and to improve and then to make sure you are following that culture and climate. As far as our investing, we currently live about 22 miles to the west on Lake Somerset. We also own a condo in South Lyon because my wife has to split some time in her role. But we are going to be, we've already moved most of the household to this area. Are going to stay in this area. This is going to be the next home. This is where we're going to be. And I believe, just as I did on Sunday when I was here in the district and walking Main Street and talking to some shop owners and people shopping, my wife is coming out with a bag out of every one of these shops. She likes to be present. She likes to support. I think it's what we do. You know, this is where you come for dinner. This, if you're here for an event, you support these vendors and these owners, and you make sure that they know who you are and why you're here for Tecumseh Schools and what we're doing. It was amazing when I asked about the relationship and how they felt about the schools, the pride in this community. And people who have been asking me about it, I said, if you've never been there, you need to get there. It's this diamond that's in the middle of an area that you may not go often, but this is an amazing community, and I would be thrilled to be part of it. And we would be investing heavily in this community.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tell us what budget development process you use and how the process works to gain broad support for the final result. Sorry.
The budget development that I would use as a new superintendent is it's often called zero-based budgeting. I would want to sit with our business department, and I need to understand every budget, every line item. And I need to work with the board to make sure that that is being communicated and ask the board what questions they have. I'm not sure of your process right now in regards to when you ask for financials and when you're looking at budgets as a school board, but my suggestion would be is that we are truly digging into that budget. The superintendent has to know every line item. The superintendent has to know, what is going on with every per pupil fund that is coming in based on, that's the main driver for our budget. Have to be able to know in that budget development what is going on with any bonds, any energy bonds, what's going on with any infrastructure that needs to be developed and where we are in regards to that process. So the budget development I am used to is sitting hand in hand with our business director, going through every budget, making sure I understand every budget, making sure that all monies are accounted for. It's especially important in this district. I give you credit. Your 15 to 18% board goal of fund equity is important because we never want to be at that point where we're borrowing dollars and cutting off our nose to spite ourselves. We need to make sure that the board is aware of what that budget is. Surprises are a bad thing. I am guessing as a board that you don't want them and appreciate them, and neither should a superintendent. And so as far as that budget development between the business office superintendent and the individual buildings, I do believe that once a budget is made, I do like the budget to be handled by that building leader. I think they should have control of their budget. I think they should have the ability to use those monies that are best for that group of children. Again, I'm going to go back to, if we are going to put the best leaders into our buildings and develop that trust and respect, once we set a budget, then they should be able to let us know how that budget is being spent in their building best for those kids. And that's how I go about my budget development and my cycle.
Tell us how you have demonstrated transparency in your previous roles.
As superintendent, social media, love it, hate it sometimes. It's a powerful tool. It's a good way to get out a lot of information. I stuck with the, I'm only going to put out those positive pieces about the district and let people know about events, what's going on. Anything in regards to any transparency reports we were putting out that had been asked for, those went out online, those went out to the committees, those went out to the parent groups that were asking for it. I made sure that whenever those things were being asked for, that I also put it out to municipality leaders. We were in a unique situation in Huron Valley. We had 5 municipalities, and so it was sometimes tough to make sure everybody had the same understanding of what the school district was doing. So I would form a number of users, a large group, and I made sure that electronically everyone was getting the same information. I just found that as far as transparency and what you're going to put out, we're never going to go back to a day where anything isn't going to be available to everybody. So I would rather put it out and give it to everybody. There should be nothing to hide in a school district. We should be transparent. We should be giving the taxpayers and our parents what they would like to know and to have. At the end of the day, I hope that develops a trust and the relationship that then allows us to run a school district that's best for that community based on that transparency.
Tell us what the expectation you create for staff. What are they? What factors do you consider in setting and communicating those expectations?
Expectations for any group, for any staff, whether it's central office, whether it's a building staff, whether it's a cohort, should be tied directly into that school improvement plan, which should feed right into our strategic plan. And those expectations, it shouldn't be a surprise. I think our professional staff and our support staffs should know exactly where we are headed in that strategic plan. I don't think there's any reason that we need to put up any hurdles and that there's any big surprises out there. I think our staffs, if we treat them like professionals as they should expect to be treated, and we make sure that they understand where we're going, then there really shouldn't be a lot of surprises. And I put a lot of this on ourselves as leaders to first develop those expectations. Then it's the superintendent's job to make sure that that's shared in cabinet, that it's shared in administrative meetings, that the building leaders understand what those expectations are with their input. And I don't think the expectations should be made in seclusion. I think we should be asking for staff's input in regards to what is a fair expectation. Because when we ask them, we need to be ready when they ask us, well, what is your expectation? What are you asking of us? What would you like to see? We need to be open to those conversations. A lot of that, it's a two-way flow. I found out early, I am not a top-down superintendent. I need to communicate and talk and listen and gather input. And so in regards to this question, as far as the expectations, it should be part of a process. I am not a fan of, in the middle of the school year, jumping to a new priority, jumping into a surprise. I just don't. We are already well underway in what should be a sequence of both academic events and school culture events and climate that's going on in our buildings. I just want to make sure that when we start a school year, the expectations are there. That means we have to be proactive, we have to be in front of it, because we need to put it out to our group so they know about it. Again, surprises are tough on a school district. And so I think if we're fair, we gather input. I think we also have the ability then to let everyone know what the expectations are but those really shouldn't be anything surprising. It should be part of our culture and climate and best practice and where we're going.
How have you demonstrated responsiveness to your board, staff, and community in your past roles?
I feel that I'm a very good communicator because I take it to heart. I also feel that my job as a superintendent is very well understood by my spouse. So there's never a question about what are we going to do if I have to be at the office, if I have to be there on the weekends, if I have to put out emails and information. If we're asked, if a board member calls me on a Sunday afternoon and says, just heard this over at Meyer, and any idea what's going on, I need to make sure I gauge the correct responsiveness based on the nature of the information. If it's something that a board member, a community member feels can wait, until Monday, can you just dig into it, can you get me some information, then we do that. But we often get information that dictates how responsive we should be. I mean, right now, we are right in the middle of trying to figure out what are we going to do to be responsive to vaping, to the oils, and to what's going on within our school districts and our community. And so it depends on what the issue is in regards to what level of responsiveness that we give. I feel comfortable in being able to get information out in a timely manner. If it needs to be immediate, then that's what we do. We do it appropriately. We do it honestly. Again, I'm not a big fan of tweeting out a lot of that information. I think there's different mechanisms that can be used. But if we are doing something district-wide based on the situation to make sure our parents know, then of course we use social media to make sure information is out. Or if we have other technology that we are currently using in regards to any of our situations. So for me, responsiveness is immediate if it needs to be. It's the research starts right away when somebody asks for something. You start your process, you make sure that you're getting that to them in a timely manner. And again, if it's something that you don't immediately have at your fingertips, you let them know when they can expect it, because that depends how deep we have to go to get that information, who we have to involve, who else is going to help get the information. And you just make sure that when you say you're going to do something, you stick with that timeline unless you're able to let them know that timeline needs to change. So based on the degree and the timeline is how responsive we're going to be. Of course, if it's something that endangers our students, we're going to put our safety protocols into effect, and we're going to move forward immediately.
What have you done to develop the skills of your staff? What were the specific topic areas? And did they ask for the training, or did you suggest it to them?
Specifically for staff, we have, in Battle Creek Lakeview, we have an extremely in-depth PLC model, Professional Learning Committee community model, and it has developed and really grown in leap and bounds over the years. So to answer your question, part of it had been suggested by ourselves as administration in regards to making sure there's PLC time for cohorts and for grade level contents to be discussed, environmental discussions to be discussed as far as academics. But then they started coming to us saying, we need more PLC time. What can you do to get us more time as a K-12 cohort where it's applicable? Is there any way we can do something within clock hours that I can be meeting with those other science teachers in the district, that we can be meeting as equity teams throughout the district? What can be done? So we worked with the groups, and this year in Lakeview, for the first time, every Monday is an early release in our school district. We were able to make that work within clock hours. It came at deep conversations. It's not negotiable because it's within clock hours, but they definitely had deep input and impact on what they were looking for, what they were hoping to get to. Quite frankly, they wanted to get away. I give them credit from PD sessions that were topic of the week or the month, and they were getting snippets of information, and we were developing expectations based on that. It really wasn't fair. So we built deeply embedded PLC times into our schedules. They are now meeting every week with their cohorts. Sometimes that's district-wide, sometimes that's building level cohorts, but it really gives us the ability to deeply involve them in a process that gives common language being spoke when we were doing equity work, when we were bringing forth new issues and new pieces to this. It gives us a piece of time that they requested that we were able to make work.
Thank you for your interest in our position. We've appreciated learning more about you. After this, you'll be able to ask a question of the board. But first, our last question. Why Tecumseh Public Schools?
As I've shared, first, I believe this community is an amazing community. Anytime you're somebody who's trying to come into a school district as a superintendent, you do your homework. You start asking questions, you start leaning on people that you trust in the area, people who know the community, people who know somebody in the community that you can talk to, and I was able to do that. I tried to stay off social media. I wanted to come into the district without any bias. I have found that social media, like I said, good and bad, gives you a lot of information, but only snippets. And so I really rely on the face-to-face conversations and researching on my own. Tecumseh matches up for me in a relationship that I hope results in me becoming superintendent. I expect and I like face-to-face. I like the relationship building. I do a lot of this. I think it's where I operate best. I'm very transparent. I miss the strategic planning piece of it. I like the board work. I enjoy moving a school district that's already good. I look to move a school district to great. I think there's always room for improvement. I think there's always more we can do for kids and for a community, and I miss it. I knew when I went to Battle Creek Lakeview, Blake, when he asked me to come over, I've been part of a number of turnaround districts, and I enjoy that work because of the ongoing relationship building. And when Blake asked me to come to Lakeview, he told the board, we may have Jim for 6 months, we may have him for 3 or 4 years. He's going to go back and become a superintendent. And I miss it. I alluded earlier in the night that I hope we had a chance to reach on it, and I'm still within my time, so I think I will. I took a leap when I was superintendent of Huron Valley. All my evaluations were highly effective. I was approached by the turnaround team in Detroit to go down and become deputy soup of the emergency manager's turnaround efforts, and I did that. I had a year left on my contract. I surprised a lot of people by doing it. It would be easy to say as a Monday morning quarterback, well, it kind of fell apart because you were there for a year when the new superintendent came in and he wanted to bring a team in, but I wouldn't give up that experience for anything. They were literally 20-hour days every day, 7 days a week. And it was the most impactful work that I have done because we were doing what's best for 50,000 students, 3,000 teachers, and it needed to be turned around. And where I tie that into this opportunity is I'm not afraid to take a risk. I'm not afraid to do the right thing. I'm not afraid to put my neck out there and be accountable for what's right for a community. I work hard. I like being part of a team. I like being part of a transparent, ongoing, positive, progressive school district. And I think Tecumseh is that school district. We live fairly close. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I will be at everything because I'm proud to be at everything. It's a little silly, but when you're walking around, when I was here on Sunday and I was looking in windows and taken a look, and I may or may not have found a gate that was open around the sports complex. You enjoy what the community supports, and you enjoy what's going on in this community, because not every community has that. This is extremely special when you have community that is backing to this setting. Very comfortable in orange and black. I graduated in 1982 as a Utica chieftain, orange and black. There's a lot of links to it, and I know that I'm looking forward to a district who wants a relationship. I will tell you this, if I am lucky enough to be considered as your superintendent, this will be the last district I work for. I think that is where we are in our lives professionally as a couple. All 4 of our kids are now on their way with their own professional careers, and I'm looking for a home with a district that wants to do the right thing for a community, for kids. And I hope that's to come soon, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Our time is up, so we have some more interviews to do, and we'll be making a selection most likely tonight. And on the finalists for our final interviews, and Donna will be in contact with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Welcome, Sean.
Suzanne Moore. We won't test you.
And if you'll just make sure you speak into the microphone, that'll be fantastic.
President Simpson,
Yes,
can I have a moment to address the board?
sure.
So I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me to be here for the interview, and I appreciate that opportunity. And some rumors have gotten back to me, and I just like a moment to address those if I may.
Okay.
So, while it is true that there was a separation agreement between myself and Clinton Community Schools, I can tell you that I have 3 children. I guess one is graduated now, but I have children over there, and the rumor is not true that I've been banned from school property. I've been on that property more times than I can even think. So, but it's a pleasure to have my kids there, and I'm not banned from that school district. And then the other rumor I heard recently was that I was being ousted in Lincoln because they took a vote not to allow the contract to do an evergreen clause, an automatic rollover. And so I was told by the board president that that does not mean that they're looking to end my tenure in Lincoln, just the fact that the contract was not allowing to be an automatic rollover. So thought I'd address those 2 if I may. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you for being with us here today. All board members will be asking questions today in a round-robin format, and we'll start with myself. So, please summarize why you would be an effective superintendent for Tecumseh Public Schools. We are looking to hear about the specific preparation you have engaged in and to become an effective superintendent. This could include things like education, certification, professional development, and work experiences in similar circumstances.
Okay, great, thank you. First, I'll say I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in education and one in business administration. So those dovetailed together has allowed me the experience to look at things sometimes from a business standpoint as well as from a school standpoint with those 2 degrees. And what has helped blend that together has been the master's degree in educational leadership. Over the time, I have acquired numerous certificates, a teaching certificate, administrative certificate, and with that, an endorsement in superintendency. I earned that through the Michigan Association of School Administrators, through the program called Courageous Journey. It was a 3-year program. I was part of cohort 5. Started out with maybe about 20 superintendents, and I think about 10 or 12 actually graduated from that cohort. We networked. We had a lot of good feedback and relationships. A lot of those superintendents I still keep in touch with today as a team to run ideas through. That's been very advantageous, as well as to speak the same common language that boards are spoken to through Michigan Association of School Boards. I have a level 2 certificate with an endorsement from, and also in data and communications. So that's been very nice to be able to know what MASB is telling boards of education at the same time. And I think I was the first one, according to Mary McCartney, first one to actually receive that certificate in the state of Michigan. So that's been nice, and I've attended a lot of those conferences with board members as well. And through that time, I've attended several professional developments, ALICE training, asbestos certification for removal, although I don't actually do it myself. It's just it's nice to walk in the room and know some do's and don'ts, right? Also, I would say that True Law, I've been to several professional development with True Law, as well as being on a job for 11 years as a superintendent. It's allowed me to see a lot of different situations and be able to reflect on past experiences and how to handle those. So I believe all those things have kind of prepared me for the superintendency.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson will proceed, Treasurer Johnson.
Thank you. Could you please provide an example of a time you established a vision of success? Could you follow that with describing how the process was used and who was involved in the process and why, along with your approach to implementation?
Okay. So an example would be the strategic situation was we had a lot to discuss and talk about within the community. And I was getting a lot of different feedback from parents and stakeholders within the community. So I decided to go for a strategic planning with the team. I talked to the Board of Education. Do you want MSB to come in or do you want me to do it? They were comfortable with the fact that I've led 2 other districts at the time through the process. And so the task was to go ahead and create a plan for people's input. And so we had public forum. We invited the administrators and teachers. The whole staff was invited to this, as well as the community members. And we also went ahead and I think sometimes people just feel better when you individually invite them as well. So there was a group of parents that, to make sure that we had parent representation there, we reached out to maybe about 10, 12 parents to invite to the meeting as well. We planned for 3 to 4 meetings, and I would say during that time period, I want to say between meetings 1 and 2, there was a unfortunate incident in Florida, right, with security and guns. And as a result of that, I had a community forum and then with the public and let them know what was going on. But at the same time, that became addressed within our strategic plan, safety. And so people wanted the doors to be more secure. And so the result of that is that we passed a $25 million bond with community support. In there are classroom doors and offices have secure, like a boot put behind it, a bolt that goes into the floor, as well as the vestibules are being redone in all of the buildings so that after the school doors closed, to enter the building, you would have to walk through a vestibule. You just couldn't walk in and walk down the hallway. You have to walk into this vestibule hallway, bring you into the office, and then you could be dismissed, if so be it. So the result was that safety enhancements through community involvement were done, and we acquired that through the bond.
Share an experience that illustrates your capacity to work collaboratively to affect positive change.
Work collaboratively for positive change. We've been short on bus drivers in our district. It has been my Achilles heel, the lack of bus drivers, and I know that the nation has a shortage as well. So within we were looking for alternative ways of maybe transporting kids. And so according to the Teamsters contract, the bus drivers are able to transport all the kids. However, there's not enough of them. So what we did was we worked collaboratively. They gave me a memo of understanding stating that I would not be required to have bus drivers drive vans. And so that would allow smaller teams and smaller groups of kids to be able to transport with vans by their coaches. And so that was something that we did together as an example. And they're decorated in Lincoln. They look really nice. And
Tell us about an unpopular decision you've made.
an unpopular decision I made. Yeah, let's see here. I would say probably one of them would be, I discussed this ahead of time with members of the Board of Education about the possibility of what to do, alternatives in the area of transportation. And we got the green light to go ahead as one of those options to go ahead and look at privatization. And so we put the privatization on the agenda last May. And of course, we do 2 reads. And by the second read, the Board of Education decided not to. And during that time, that was very unpopular with the staff. They did not like the idea of privatization. And so we decided to go one more time, and we worked with the unions, and they're like, just give us one more year, post the position. We've had a turnover in the director's seat. And they're like, go ahead and post the position one more time, and let's see if we can find someone. And as a result of that, we were able to, I think we bumped the salary up maybe $15,000 to $20,000 to attract more talent this time. And so I'm confident that, as well as other administrators, that we've found our director now. So, but for that period of time, I was very visible going out into the bus garage and meeting with the teams and the staff members, but it wasn't a popular decision.
Regarding curriculum, who drives curriculum? How would you organize the district in a way that maximizes student performance and potential?
So I've been in different districts. The districts that I've been in have been size C and Class A size school districts. And so as a teacher, principal, and superintendent, I think they all did it differently. Where I'm at now, we have a curriculum director, and we have school improvement chair, people that look at that. And so I would say that one of the most important things to look at is to look at the data of the curriculum and how it's lining up, the scope and sequence of where our students are performing. And also just go ahead and review the benchmarks and look at integrated curriculum as well. So for example, if you're struggling with students interpreting graphs, one of the things that I've done in my past is that we've talked to our social studies department to get them to implement more graphs in their lesson plans and get kids to make graphs in social studies, even though it might be a math benchmark. So, but looking at the team and not just superintendent, curriculum director, principals, but and teacher leaders as well, the whole team.
Thank you.
Tell us about your impact on student achievement in your most recent position. Please describe the situation, the task, what actions you took, and the outcome. Please include specifics about student achievement data.
Okay. One of the situations that when I arrived was the fact at Lincoln that they struggled with the layoff procedure the year before I arrived because of the teacher evaluation system. And so one of the tasks that I was asked to accomplish by the teacher leaders when I first arrived was in the evaluation. And the reason why I bring this up is because how it relates to the student achievement. They weren't measuring the student achievement inside of the evaluation what I would consider appropriately or legally, as it was mandated, I want to say, in 2010 by legislation. So we use NWEA. We put that into the teacher evaluation. And because it was such a huge change, I asked that everyone just go ahead and show growth of being 2 points per student. The teachers were very nervous about that. I knew it was a very low bar, but they were going through a great deal of change that year coming out of the deficit elimination plan, as well as this was a new tool. The Danielson model was new to them, plus now we get this bar of NWA to put in there. So we have done a reflection meeting every year and reflect on that, and we have raised the bar every year. And I think this year one of the highest numbers is 6 RIT points for some of the younger grades on that. We have constantly hit highly effective and effective status for our principals, which is an accumulative score for all the data in there. I'm sorry I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I'm going to say overall district-wide, I'm going to say the result was around in the low 90s for the cumulative 90-92 for the cumulative score for NWA and for the SLOs, the student learning objectives for the district last year.
Share an experience that reflects your views and leadership approach as it relates to employee morale.
Employee morale. Thank you. I arrived in Lincoln in 2015-16, and during that time the district was in deficit elimination. Elementary teachers had 20-minute preps a day. High school teachers had 0 preps. Class sizes were around 35 to 38 in the elementary for some of them, as well as the middle school and high school. So if you can imagine, the teachers were very exhausted and tired by the end of the day. It was a long school year for them, and I felt like the morale was somewhat at the lowest point that I've ever seen in my career. So I did a couple things to increase morale. We started a program called Employee of the Month, and it just wasn't for the teachers, but it could be any employee. And so we would recognize them at the Board of Education meeting with a gift certificate, and someone would recommend them to the HR director and myself, and we would pick, and we continue to do that to this day. That program, as well as I would go into classrooms and just make a visit, not doing a formal evaluation, just kind of seeing kids. If it's important for me to go to a football or basketball or a fine arts event, then I think it's equally important for me to walk into classrooms where the learning is taking place. And so I would go in, and then I would just write a little note and send it into the teacher's mailbox. That was another one. And then for the administrators, we started a thing that I coined the phrase Team Lincoln. And so we made a wooden star. And so it's gold, it's got Team Lincoln and blue across it. And so one of the things that we do is that we start off that meeting. I gave it out the first time. And so every administrative meeting that we start out with, about 21 of us, whoever received it presents it to a colleague the next time. So it's been well received, and people have done little different things. Like one principal this past year, I think she set the bar quite high, not only did she pass the star out, but every one of us got a blue star with something written on the back thanking us. And so I think a lot of that is happening. And then I also will do just thank you cards for something. And sometimes I'll put like the little logo lapel pin in the card and just send that out to them as well. We also do student recognition. Every once in a while, we'll bring students to the Board of Education for student recognition. And I think that's nice for staff as well, because you're recognizing the work that's happening inside the athletics or fine arts or the classroom. So those are just some of the things that we've done.
Please provide an example of time you strongly disagreed with a decision of the board. How did you handle it, and what was the outcome?
So how I handle it was by presenting multiple options behind closed doors, different scenarios of what I consider to be different outcomes for that. I would give like a T-square and say that here's an opportunity for us to grow in this area and maybe move the academic needle or the morale needle. And so ultimately when it's done, it is the Board of Education decision. And so President Simpson and the rest of the board, if I disagree with you on something, then it's either the board president or the 7 of you will know, but I don't go out and just tell everyone that was a bad idea. So, and I don't have an example to give you because I won't.
All right.
Could you please share an experience that will help us understand your approach to using data and sharing data with key stakeholders?
Okay, so another thing that I do is I do a from the desk of the superintendent, a memo. I would say I probably average about 3 to 4 a month. And so I have a portfolio that I will leave with you later, and you'll see what we call our financial dashboard in here. And you also, one of the things that I'll do is I'll take a portion of that and just give an update to the staff, for that matter, on what's going on with the district finances. As well as I'll use data to go ahead and also share maybe with the Board of Education or a finance committee how old the buses are. So, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, Mr. Johnson?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Please share an experience that will help us understand your approach to using data and sharing data with key stakeholders.
Okay. So the other thing with key stakeholders I do is I'll have coffee with the superintendent, and I usually start off with maybe 2 to 5 minutes just talking about different aspects of the district and what's going on, whether it's an update with a bond or an update with just whatever may be on their mind at the time. Sometimes, like last year, it was what's going on with the 10th day of school cancellation. And so that was really big. You know, that was the most popular thing going on last year. People wanted to know about that. So coffee with the superintendent. I also have something that I call leadership breakfast, which includes the fire chief, members of the police department, township supervisors. I have 5 in my district. The school board president. I feel like I'm leaving someone out, but there's maybe about 15 people sit around. I say fire chief. So we sit around, we'll just discuss different aspects. Maybe it's the zoning and new houses going up to, you know, big events coming into the town. We also try to communicate things through our website. If you go to our website, under bond update, there's 2 spreadsheets. One is about an update on each project of the school bond, and another one is about an update on the Michigan School Police, or Michigan State Police grant that we received, and so we update them on that as well. I also have, I meet with realtors, I meet with daycare providers annually, local clergy, and just, we have conversations and share data. So, and I also last year started this where I went out and I would meet with like all the elementary parapros, secondary parapros, every teaching staff meeting, maintenance department, food service, just the whole gamut, and just hearing their concerns. And it was very popular received, and that had an impact on some of the professional development that we're providing in this school year.
Tell us about a time you were able to bring people together who previously had significant differences of opinion.
There's been a couple of those. So one of which is when I arrived in Lincoln, I heard the phrase a lot of times that I have 3 elementary school buildings, 3 K-5. There is an early childhood center, but I had 3 K-5s, and people describe those being like 3 silos. Like it would be like 3 different school districts, kind of, to speak. We started doing more things together. I was trying to pull, my task was to get rid of that mentality that they're each on their own to do their own thing and there's no connectivity, that we are all part of Lincoln. So over time, one of the things that we've done is we have eliminated Bishop Bengals and Childs Cougars. All the schools' mascots are rail splitters. They're all Lincoln rail splitters. We've also, we'll do major events together. So one of the things I had a vision for was to do this reading in the park. There's a, if you drive around our campus, there is some trees and just right in between of like a couple of buildings. And so it's big enough and it kind of sinks down that we do reading in the park there, and we give every kid who shows up a free book to read over summer. And so the principals and teachers help put that on together. So that helped bring them together, as well as the PTOs. We have a district PTO now that helps put on events together. Even one of my elementaries seemed to be broken when I arrived there. There was and it was Bishop Elementary, there was a Spanish immersion program, and there was the traditional English speaking classes. And I think it had to do with they were doing layoffs the year before, and so if you were a Spanish teacher, obviously you can teach the English class, and so there was some animosity. I even considered at one time moving the Spanish immersion out, but what I did was I started having meetings with both sides of parent groups and with teachers, and as a result, when the new principal came on board, because I was having those meetings right before, it was a smooth transition, and I just say, he was a great hire, and he has done a lot in that building, and so I no longer see that division amongst the elementaries as much. But that took time, with a lot of meetings by myself as well as the principals, and creating opportunities for them to serve together.
Please describe what a visible and accessible superintendent is from your perspective.
Okay, so a visible and accessible superintendent, for example, I like to go to see the kids perform. So it's not uncommon on a Friday night that you'll see me at a basketball game or football game, or during the week at a fine arts event. Now, to be accessible, I could be there and that would be visible, but if I sat up in the press box or if I sat way up high, yes, you can see me, but I'm not accessible. So actually, it's kind of funny because in one of the letters of recommendations in here, I believe it says that they have picked up on it. By first quarter, you'll see Mr. McNabb down by the fence. Sometime during the second quarter, he goes out by the sideline to see the football team. By third quarter, you'll see him over there with the band, and by fourth quarter, he's back on the field and greeting the coach at the end. So I'm like, wow, people have actually marked my plan out and how I'm visible and so forth. So I'm a very visible superintendent. I've been told that by the board. That was a big change for Lincoln when I got there. One of my principals pulled me aside and just kind of jokingly says, my staff thinks I'm in trouble. I'm like, why? Because you've been in the building 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So, and so if I was your superintendent, I do track that to make sure I'm not forgetting a school and try to keep track of that, of going into which buildings I'm going in, how frequently. I would say with the 5 buildings, I'd like to get into the buildings more frequently when I would arrive. But then over time, we would kind of stabilize, maybe like once a week, I like to be in each building during the day, but you would see me at events.
How have you invested in the communities you have worked in, and how would you do so here?
Time. Time is probably the biggest accessibility for that. Working with the administrative assistant, there are different times in my schedule that are blocked out for certain meetings. Like HR director and I, we do not meet after school till 4 o'clock. We can meet all day long for that, right? For one of those meetings. That's usually time that is more productive for union meetings, school events, parents who are getting off later who go work. So I try to return emails within 24 hours, 48 at the latest. I try to go to as many events as possible. So I live 7.5 miles from here. So I would, as your superintendent, I'm not necessarily saying I would move, but you would see me in the evenings, you would see me in the town. We're already very visible in this community, my family and I. So I would just be a little bit more intentional on the time and dates that I would be here and be invested. So I would attend things that you'd be like, that's not even a school event. You know, like, but the kids are there though, right? That's important.
Tell us what budget development process you use and how the process works to gain broad support for the final result.
Okay. Budget. So one of the things I like to do is I like to sit down with the principals and the directors of those departments and get their feedback of where they're thinking. So there's typically business managers will just roll over the numbers from next year. And the conversation usually starts off with, okay, do you need more and less, and tell me why? You know, what major projects are you having done? And so I'll be honest with you, I don't have that now, that conversation. The business manager does. But when I was a superintendent and business manager for 5 years, those were the conversations I had. I do, as superintendent, talk to the finance director. I get a summary from him, and he has those conversations with each of the members, and then he talks to me about major facility projects, curriculum purchases. We try to put that on a plan. We have our bus procurement on a plan, and so all of that gets put into the plan. We discuss that ahead of time, so there's usually not any major surprises. And then also that's talked over with the Board of Education and the Finance Committee, and so I like to get the input from the department heads and principals primarily. So sometimes it's been myself, other times it's the finance director.
Tell us how you have demonstrated transparency in your previous roles.
Previous roles, transparency, I would say I'd like to go ahead and have, what do we call it? Give me a second, hold on. State of District Address, where we hold it sometime around January and February, and just give an update in curriculum, finances, if there's a bond project coming up, if there's a issue that I know the community is going to want to hear. Sometimes I'll share, talk about that topic, just because it answers a lot of questions going into that. Back in the day when Florida had their issue, there was a lot of people who were talking about the safety of Lincoln. What are we doing? So I got word of that, talked over the board president, and I decided to, because we knew some people were going to come to the Board of Education meeting and to talk, and really that wasn't the time to have a conversation, and I thought a conversation was needed. So what I did was I held a forum just for that, to get their feedback and input and give them the opportunity to have that. And so just being upfront with the issues of at hand. Also, I think sometimes sharing what the law states that we have to do has been helpful. Just being accessible, through the meetings that I hold with the community. I find that sometimes the unplanned meetings, that being at the football game or the fine arts event, I will get approached and share something. Responding to the community and I have said, I'm sorry to the community members, you're absolutely right, that shouldn't have happened. And I'll follow up on that, so.
Tell us about the expectations you create for staff. What are they? What factors do you consider in setting and communicating those expectations?
So with communications, how I communicate the expectations, I talk to them about returning emails. I talk to them about my expectation for myself and what I would expect for them in the same. I also share the Board of Education policy. So at our administrative meeting, we'll take field trip policy and we'll throw it on the agenda. And we'll just basically highlight a couple of those things. They have passwords to Neola's administrative guidelines as well. So I tell them how they can do the search and so forth. But just talking about board policies is one expectation. Sometimes we'll talk about if there's a situation, they'll call me and say, what would you want me to do on this? What I found out sometimes is they'll also call my administrative assistant, what do you think Sean would do? Or they'll call the HR director and says, what does central office want me to do in this situation? If the HR director doesn't know, then sometimes I'll get a text from them. They also know I'm available for them at all times. I just went to the superintendent's conference last couple of days. They know that if they need me, they can call me. Sometimes it's easier for me to answer a text if they call me and I don't answer the phone. If they call me right back, then I'm walking out whatever meeting I'm at. It must be an urgent matter for them, and I'm walking out. The joke on that was one time I was with one of my administrators and my mother called. And then I didn't answer it, and then she called back right away. I said, I gotta take this. He goes, oh, your mom has that rule too? I go, no, she's just my mother. She's called twice, I gotta take it. So, but it's good. I think the biggest thing is on communication, is getting back with parents in a timely manner. Because if you don't answer them that call, then that's just kind of brewing. And they need to have a voice. I was on the phone the other day with a parent, and it was just the family was having a rough day. And so there was a situation. Do I think that some of our staff members handled it poorly? No. I think they did everything that I would have done in that situation. It just was an unfortunate circumstance for the family that day. So, but you need to listen. You need to stop and listen to them. She didn't need me to tell her she was wrong, that I disagreed with her. She just needed me to listen. And then I told her that I would follow up this conversation with the department head.
How have you demonstrated responsiveness to your board, staff, and community in your past roles?
With the Board of Education, we've developed what we call the stoplight through MASB. And so there's a red, yellow, green. And so there are certain things that I am to tell the Board of Education as soon as possible, like it's urgent. Those are red light issues. Yellow is, can you please tell us during the day? And green, please update this in your next memo to us. Give me an example of a red light issue would be an evacuation. And sometimes it would look like this. I may just say, I'm evacuating the middle school. You would all get a group text. I may call the president at the time and say, President Simpson, here's what's going on. I'll debrief you later. I'm in the middle of this, right? And so usually board presidents are like, yes, you need to handle that and then get with me as soon as possible. So all of you would be on alert. I've evacuated the building. There's a safety issue or something, and then I'm dealing with it. So if you get calls, That's what the superintendent's paid to do. He's dealing with it, we've been told. At the same time, there's a follow-up to that later, to that text message. This is what happened, something was written on the bathroom wall, we call the police in, they examine it, we're all going back in the building. Usually by the time kids are going back in the building, the Board of Education has been given the green light, it's all clear to go back in as well. Now, the unfortunate circumstance of that is this, that with all the cell phones out there now, parents want to know at the same time. Because as I'm texting you, calling law enforcement, talking to principals, and doing our protocol list, which I put up at the big screen with one of those forums with the parents, I'll never beat that list of people I have to talk to in enough time to get to the parents. And because as they're walking out of the high school over to destination B, they're already calling mom and dad and telling them the school's being evacuated. And so that was one of the issues that the parents brought to my attention. And I put the flow chart up there of what I'm going through, and the parents, the community said at that forum, we want him to handle the kids first. It's not about answering the telephone calls. He needs to handle the situation. That's what I've been trained through some of the state police department people, is that you handle the situation, debrief who you have to debrief later. So the responsiveness in that's probably the one that I don't win on, but I communicate on afterwards. And so at the same time, just that listening to what the need is and trying to get with whatever the issue is on one-on-one. So I try to do emails in 24 to 48 hours. The most uncommon thing right now is I'm sitting here and my cell phone's been turned off. It's a blessing and a curse to that, right? But certain administrators know where I'm at and they know why it's turned off. And the HR director is in charge, so. But, so in all circumstances, there's someone else. If I can't be available at the time, there's someone else that they know who to go talk to.
What have you done to develop the skills of your staff? What were the specific topic areas? And did they ask for the training, or did you suggest it to them?
So I answered this just a little bit, but I want to give it more in depth on this. When I was doing those meetings going around to the different departments, like the teachers and the paraprofessionals and so forth, one of the things I heard was, the situation was, Mr. McNatt, back in the day, there would be an autistic kid coming through the district. And as a result, one parapro would learn how to deal with that student. And then next year, when the child moved up, the parapro would move up. And so because of some of the mental health issues and some of the behavioral issues that are affecting society now, a lot of staff members said, we need to know what we can do. We need to know how we can react. And so, and one of the things they said, the nonviolent crisis prevention intervention, professional development is not enough. And so I heard that loud and clear. So what we did was we brought in 2 presenters this year. One was Rob Diesel from Troon Law Firm to talk about special education, law, and dues and things that we can do, and the importance of being in compliance with IEPs. So he was the first half of the day, and then the second half of the day, we brought in Mrs. Reynolds. I'm not sure if she has a doctorate, I can't recall, sorry. But her thing was talking about giving them tools within their tool belt and how they would be able to perform to that. The HR director, I share that, the feedback I received, the HR director and the director of special education were the 2 individuals who went out and found these individuals to put on. They did a survey, and I want to say for the Troon Law person, there wasn't a negative comment in there. The closest you would have was it wasn't enough time. They wanted more of it. And so it was very positive. And so I also, one of the memos from the desk of the superintendent, thanked those 2 individuals for putting on the PD and carrying out that vision as well. So, and we're going to have more of that throughout the year, because never should PD, professional development, be a one and done. The success of professional development, the 95% of that comes in the follow-up and the ongoing training with the staff as well. So those individuals will be back in the future as well.
Well, thank you for your interest in our position. We've appreciated learning about you. After this, you'll be able to ask a question of the board. But first, our last question. Why Tecumseh Public Schools?
Why Tecumseh Public Schools? I see that my skill set of working with groups of people in communication and financial is one that I've experienced some success in various arenas in my educational career. And I would love the opportunity to bring that to this district. Why Tecumseh? Tecumseh, my address is Clinton, but like I said, my daughter's got friends here, we shop here. Our orthodontist is Dr. Hinsey. My son and I, we get a haircut at Gregory's. You know, we eat here, we go to stores here, and so we're very much involved in the Tecumseh businesses. And so we know some friends and family. Well, excuse me, they call them aunt and uncle, but they're not aunt and uncle, so my kids do. We go to church, and I think it's Adrian address, but with a lot of Tecumseh people. So we feel like connected to the community. I feel like it'd be a good fit because I've got to meet a lot of people. I believe that Tecumseh Public Schools is ready to be stabilized financially, to be unified with the community. And to me, that is an exciting time. That is like not watching an airplane in the sky, but watching an airplane take off at an airport. You know, and I enjoy seeing that. Like, I enjoy seeing growth in individuals. So I would enjoy being a part of that. At the same time, I will tell you that on a personal reason, that there's a son who would love to see his dad on a more regular basis. So I'd probably save some time on the road from going out to Tecumseh. Probably not in the beginning of my career if I was here at Tecumseh, but over time I would at least be able to go home for dinner and come back, where things like that doesn't exist now. So there's some professional and personal reasons for that too.
So do you have a question for the board before we wind this down?
Yes, I do, thank you. I would like to ask the board an open question to whoever would like to respond. What are the board's priorities in the next year?
Well, within the next year, our priorities is to get everybody within the school district unified. We want to balance the budget. And one of the key things we want to accomplish within the next year is maybe a reorganization of our schools. So those are the key areas. And of course, finding a superintendent. So.
True.
First. Yeah.
In the very near future, correct? Right?
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If everybody could complete the surveys, the feedback forms, and give them to Terry.
He wouldn't be alive.
Okay, we're going to start again, so if everybody could please have a seat.
Our last interview this evening is with Mr. Wayne Rodell. Please welcome Wayne.
Nice meeting you yesterday.
Becky Brooks.
Kevin Jackson. Nice to meet you.
John Benson. Suzanne Moore, nice to meet you.
And Wayne, if you could just make sure you speak directly into the microphone, that would be great.
All right, I'll do my best. How's that?
Nice.
Good.
Excellent, thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you, Wayne, for joining us today. All board members will be asking questions today, so we're going to do a round robin format. So we're going to begin with myself. If you could please summarize why you'd be an effective superintendent for Tecumseh Public Schools. We are looking to hear about the specific preparation you have engaged in to become an effective superintendent. This could include things like education, certification, personal development, and work experiences in similar circumstances.
All right, very good, thank you. Well, thanks for having me tonight. You didn't have a home football game, so at least I could get in and out of the parking lot very well. Though every town on my way from Fowlerville to here had a game tonight, and so I'm glad I left early, but beautiful night for sure. So my resume was posted on your website, so I'm not going to go through all of those pieces. So I think what I'll do is try to focus on some pieces that maybe weren't in my resume that folks in the audience might be interested in. I'll start with saying that there's really there's no substitute for experience. So if you're looking for an experienced superintendent, I've been the superintendent at Fowlerville Schools for the past 7 years. There isn't much that I haven't seen in the 7 years that I've been the superintendent. I was the assistant superintendent prior to that, and I was in charge of everything non-instructional. So I had an opportunity to look at transportation and food service, custodial maintenance, and different things like that. So that was very valuable to give me a well-rounded understanding of a school district and how it runs and operates. I'd like folks to know that I've always been a lifelong learner. I'm currently in the second year of the Horizons program through MASA and hope to have my superintendent's endorsement on my administrative certificate, which I received from Saginaw Valley State University. I've been through multiple other trainings, currently going through some cognitive coach training, which really helps me be a coach to employees and other folks that I'm working with to help them really think and analyze about whatever process or problems that they have that they want to work through. Not so much in my resume, you know, I was a science teacher before I moved to the other side and got into the administrative world. And while I was teaching, I was also a coach and had an opportunity to coach some very good kids that made me look pretty good as a coach as well. I'm an Adrian College graduate, so I'm not local, but I started my life and educational career at that level here in this area, and actually did my student teaching here at Tecumseh High School with Jerry Nelson, and I credit my success as a teacher and an administrator to Jerry. He was a phenomenal science teacher here, and really gave me a great start as I've moved along in my career. So that's kind of some things that get me ready to be a superintendent, and like I said, there isn't much I haven't seen in 7 years. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Secretary Johnson will be will ask the next question, and then we'll proceed in order.
Could you please provide us an example of a time you established a vision of success? Could you follow that up, please, with describing the process that was used, letting us know who was involved in the process and how they were involved, and what your approach was to implementation?
Okay, I would probably start with this one. If you take a look at our data at Fowlerville Community Schools, you might find that we've had some real struggles with our literacy and math scores, like many school districts, and with the implementation or the upcoming, third grade reading law and things of that sort, it really became a focus of ours. And so I helped our administrative team develop a vision around a coherent, K-12 math and literacy program that we knew really needed to begin at our elementary level and work its way up through the district. And we created that vision really together because you know, it was pretty straightforward. We knew we needed to have kids be more successful than what they were according to you know, the data that we were looking at. So how did we move forward? I really leaned heavily on our elementary folks to develop plans that could achieve our goals. And some of our goals out of our visioning, you know, came along with 90-minute math blocks, 90-minute ELA blocks, K-5. Those cornerstones were kind of important to us in terms of trying to achieve. And so we developed some plans around trying to implement those blocks of time that we could really dedicate to those core subjects. Once we had some plans in place, we've got, in my district, we've got different committees of the board, you know, so if I had a curriculum adjustment, we would call our curriculum committee together, which included 3 members of the board. We would get together, we would go over what those curricular plans would be, what our thinking was, the pros, the cons, and we would have great discussion around implementing whatever those changes were going to be. We would modify based on input from that group before we would take anything to the full board. Part of that process, because there were going to be some changes with our specials and the way that the structure of the day went, we included a lot of parent input, so we've got some parent-teacher organizations, our KPTN, our Smith PTC, that gives us access to a lot of active parents, you know, that we pulled on board to talk about these ideas. Ultimately, we developed a plan that we think had good buy-in from our parents. The Board of Education supported the plan. We took that plan to the full board. We sought approval for the plan. And then from there, we began having meetings. I call them open forums, community meetings where folks could come in and ask all the questions that they might have relative to the implementation and how it might be different. So we tried to involve as wide of a group as we could. And in that particular case, we've now been working on 90-minute math and ELA blocks for the past 4 years. So we're pretty happy with it. We didn't get a lot of pushback from anybody because we think we involved all the right stakeholders through the process.
Share an experience that illustrates your capacity to work collaboratively to affect positive change.
Let's see, how about we take a look at, we just implemented the 7 mindsets in our buildings, K-12, this past school year, at the beginning of the school year. You know, it took us a year of development with some subcommittees of staff and teachers throughout the district in all the buildings. You know, in terms of working collaboratively, you know, my assistant superintendent, now, I'm going to back up just a second. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things today that I might say me, but it's really we. I've got a great assistant superintendent, Tim Dowker, and I've got tremendous building leadership, and so we develop things together. I just am the one that can help push things forward, and I'm a liaison between the board and what we want to do. So we collaborated on how we might, well, one, we knew we had a social emotional issue within our district. We have a lot of hurting kids out there, and we needed to have some strategies in place. Having that type of goal in our school improvement plans was important. And so these committees met. We looked at different plans that would work for us and work within our structures. We found the 7 mindsets. We spent a few months studying what the 7 mindsets, what it was, what the program was, what it looked like, how we might implement it, and then we moved it forward from there. I would tell you that at our opening days with our staff back in August, we had a lot of excitement around the 7 mindsets and trying to really educate the whole child more so than just, math, science, English, because until kids are comfortable and feel safe and feel real good, it's tough for them to move forward on the academic piece. So that would be a collaborative process that we follow.
Tell us about an unpopular decision you made.
Man, when you're a superintendent for 7 years, you make a lot of unpopular decisions. And some, the nature of the job is you can't keep everybody happy. So I think for me, I make decisions that are really student-based and let me sleep at night. And if that happens and I take care of kids and I can sleep, then I feel real good about those decisions. So how about this quick one? So we had our technology director resigned and took a position at Oakland ISD. We had been trying to restructure how we ran our Fowlerville Online Learning Academy, and we were trying to take a look at resources to hire a dean of students at our high school. Our high school is about this size, has a principal and assistant principal, and we wanted to hire a dean. Part of that hire really leaned back to wanting to free up time with our one assistant principal there so that he could work with students who are chronic failures, absentee issues, looking for the root cause to those types of problems. And it was really the final piece to a process where we found resources to put a gen ed social worker both at our junior high and then our 2 elementary buildings as well. Because as part of the 7 mindsets, we were trying to develop a continuum for our students to have somebody in the building who was really designated to the mental health and the well-being of our kids. And part of that was as part of the restructuring, I'm relatively fiscally responsible. I think you'll probably ask questions relative to how I budget, but if I add, I like to delete so that it's a budget neutral decision. And so part of this process was we had a person who was a part-time manager of our theater. And so part of the restructuring was to take our tech director position that had just been vacated, combine that position with our theater because it's a state-of-the-art facility, a lot of technology in it, and it was a good match of job skills. But it caused, it was painful and not popular because it would have affected the layoff of that person who was in our theater. I will say that we had some unbelievably great students come to a couple board meetings, really talk in support of that position and the value of that position. Ultimately, the board asked me to take a look at some other options, which I did, and we found a different option that was relatively unpopular, caused a couple painful board meetings in which folks weren't happy with the direction that we were going, and we found a different way. So a lot of conversation, but it worked out. But it wasn't real popular when we went down that road out of the gate.
Regarding curriculum, who drives it? How would you organize the district in a way that maximizes students' performance and potential?
Well, I think the data drives your curriculum. I think you need to look at what your strengths and weaknesses are. I come from a coach background, so I like to say, what do we do well, where do we need help? And so I think your curricular focus really is developed around where you need to augment your curriculum for your students so that they can have success. I think that curriculum really, though, once the superintendent develops the focus areas, you have building principals who are really developing school improvement plans. You probably have somebody here who works on the consolidated app, which is the funding mechanism for all of your curricular work that happens. And that work on the curriculum is really coming out of your school improvement teams, which are happening at the building level. So I think that the superintendent is going to get the idea. I'm sure that everyone up there on this board, knows where, you want to focus on curriculum. So, I'll look at the data, we'll talk about it, we'll develop focus areas, and then really it's our building leadership and their teams within their buildings that are going to develop the plans around the curriculum. How do you maximize it? I don't know if that question is kind of directed towards your current alignment. I would just say that you look at what you want to achieve, and then you align yourself in the way that makes the most sense to make your district most efficient, so that students are spending their maximum amount of time in classes doing the work in your goal areas that you have. The alignment will take care of itself, I think, when you take a look at what the needs of the students are as you're moving forward.
Thank you.
Tell us about your impact on student achievement in your most recent position. Please describe the situation, the task, what actions you took, and the outcome. Please include specifics about student achievement data.
Let's look at, I talked earlier about our 90-minute blocks relative to our ELA and our math. When we take a look at what the impact is there, now we're heavily focused on the NWEA assessment, which we use K-8. It's not a real effective measure when we're looking at high school level, but it's really good to provide our staff the kind of data that can inform their instruction, and that's pretty important. We've got some other measures that we use at the lower level, but what I could tell you is that when we look at our NWEA data, and if you were to pull my evaluations, I present our data in very good detail to our board. What you would find is that over the past 3 years, our NWEA data has increased each year. So the NWEA looks at a RIT score. I can't quote what the RIT score was 3 years ago, but what I could tell you is that when we look at the trend of the graph, we have an upward trend in both ELA and math. The upward trend in math is greater than at ELA, but we started off in a little bit better shape. I would tell you that our students in those two areas have greater achievement. In terms of third grade reading, we're not as uptight about how many students might be retained in third grade if that moves forward, but that's what you would see. I'd be happy to bring the board that data piece from my eval if you'd like to see that at some point. But we really focus, I'll tell you, on growth. What I can say is that in our district, I know that 92% of our teaching staff, in terms of what we've set for our goals in our evaluation for teachers, 92% of our folks achieve at least a year's growth with our kids. and we feel real good about the direction that we're going in terms of the growth of our students.
Thank you.
Please share an experience that reflects your views and leadership approach as it relates to employee morale.
Employee morale is always the, you know, the piece that can give you the most value, you know. So, you know, I'll tell you something real simple that we do. So, you know, teacher appreciation rolls around. I call it staff appreciation, just like our welcome back breakfast at the start of the year is for the whole staff and not just teachers. I think we're all in it together in terms of our district. But my assistant and I, you know, we always hatch. He's a little more creative than I am, and my executive secretary is really good on Pinterest. So we come up with a theme for our teacher appreciation, and they're always real simple, but we end up taking some time and we make our staff appreciation gifts, and then Tim and we walk around on Teacher Appreciation Day and we hand deliver one of those to every staff member in our district, which is about 350 folks, over the course of a day. Great exercise. It's not the gift that we give the folks, because generally it's chocolate or a little bit of candy or something like that with a cute saying on it that reinforces my theme for the school year. But it's the handshake, the smile, and it's the personal thank you for the work that they do for us, from our drivers to our custodians to our paras to our food service folks to our teaching staff. So small item, I would tell you, if you talk to anybody in our district, that goes a long, long way in developing, you know, some just goodwill, good feelings, and improved staff morale. I would also tell you that the district, we brought in, we had a committee of teachers who were really into wellness and talking about that. And so I was able to secure a couple of grants, wellness grants, and we brought a nutritionist in for 10 weeks who did a 2-hour class once a week for 10 weeks. And you know, it was kind of like the Biggest Loser kind of competition for those folks. But we had 55 staff members from all of our groups attend that wellness piece, and I still get emails today from folks who've lost 15, 20 pounds from that, and you know, they feel real good about where they're at. You know, I don't tell them that I did it, so that I hope they use less sick days, you know, because in terms of the district, that's a real good benefit, right? Because we're short on subs, it's hard to find them. So for those 50 folks, you know, it goes to show that I think the district and administration cares about our staff, so much so that, you know, we'd work to get a grant and bring someone in to teach our people a little bit about eating better. There are a lot of other things that you can do to work on morale, but those are a couple simple things that we do.
Please provide an example of a time you strongly disagreed with the decision of the board. How did you handle it, and what was the outcome?
Does it matter what position I was in when the decision happened? I'll go back to when I was an assistant principal. So when we have students who violate the handbook, student code of conduct, our students and the administration, if we're looking at a long-term suspension, take them to the board discipline committee, and the administrator lays out, you know, kind of the facts of the situation, and makes a recommendation to the board discipline committee on what we think the suspension should be, depending on all the factors. And I can remember, you know, not the specifics of the discipline, but making a recommendation that was pretty strong. And I remember the board discipline committee coming back after they deliberated on it and really made a decision, you know, that was very light, you know, relative to what I thought should happen. You know, so what happened from that? Well, you know, the board made the decision, and I went home and, you know, groused to my wife, and I went to bed. I woke up in the morning, I went back to work and said, well, I did my job. You know, the board, they're all people, they listened to the facts, they made their decision, and we moved on from it. Because the board discipline committee is what it is. Ultimately, in some decisions, they're the decision maker. And when they make a decision, we all, from the superintendent to other staff in the district, you know, report to the board and work for the board. So sometimes there's not much we can do with some of the decisions. So, you know, as superintendent, you know, what have I done? I've really reflected on what I've done with the board to make sure that they understand my position on a topic, whatever that might be. For example, I could go back to, you know, the layoff of the Albertson Center manager. You know, I had laid out a course and a plan. We had circumstances change when folks came to a board meeting. The board asked me to look at alternative plans. I looked at alternative plans and acted those plans. I think I have a great solution in place now. It was different than what I started off as, but it's a great solution. So I'm not always hung up on winning. If I was hung up on winning, I might have not been able to go down that path. But I've been at it long enough to understand, you know, the board superintendent relationship, and ultimately the question is, are we moving the district in a direction that is great for the community, great for the school, and most importantly, great for the students that are there.
Thank you.
Could you please share with us an experience that will help us understand your approach to using data and sharing data with key stakeholders?
That's an interesting question. You know, I'm prepared to answer it, but I want you to understand where Fowlerville is when it comes to data. Our Board of Education in Fowlerville wants to see data, looks at data. I had instructed our curriculum assistant superintendent to pull together our recent M-STEP data. We did a presentation last Tuesday night to the board on that data. I would tell you that you know, it was all fine and good, but to our Board of Education, they want to know when kids leave our school, are they successful? Are they happy? Are kids getting into the colleges that they want? Are they getting into the military? Do they have enough CTE skills from a program, a certificate, some early college experience, so that when they leave us, they can either become gainfully employed or achieve whatever their post-secondary goals are. So we pull and look at data often. We pull it more from a building level, and we analyze data to make sure that our kids are in the proper groupings at our elementary buildings especially. We've got some specific time where we pull kids together to remediate or to extend their learning so that students can achieve. At our middle school, they've got time where teams of teachers come together and take a look at academic data, more percentages in class, pass, fail, who's struggling, what supports can be put in place for that. So specifically, we haven't spent a lot of time going into exactly what the numbers are. You know, I'm a trend person. You know, to say a student's got a RIT score of 205 here and a RIT score of 208 here doesn't give us enough actionable data to make any changes. So we've spent a lot of time with our teaching staff to be able to look at the data that they get in their classroom so that they can make adjustments to how they're teaching that student during the day. So big global data is what it is to me. It's the specific stuff that teachers are gathering every day that's the most important to me. So I don't feel like I answered your question real well, so I might want to come back to that one later if I could. So.
Tell us about a time you were able to bring people together who previously had significant differences of opinion.
So part of our restructuring for the creating the blocks of time for ELA and math had to do with pulling out art that happened to be a special at the time. So all of our students, got 30 minutes a week of art, and that was, K-5 in both of our buildings. We're structured in a K-2 building and then a 3, 4, 5 building. And all of those kids had art. And so part of the plan moving forward to get that time, those 90-minute blocks, we did our specials differently. And we eliminated art as a K-5 specials. Now, it doesn't have to do with, the fact that we aren't into art, because we are. And our district is really robust in terms of the art that we offer kids, really beginning in the 6th grade through 12th grade. But if we really take a look at the time that students were in art, 30 minutes a week, once a week, it wasn't a lot of time at the K-5 level. And so through the course of discussion, we made that change. Was not a real popular change. We had some difficulty at the board level. We had parents and community folks who thought we were just simply cutting art, that we didn't care about the arts. I mean, the narrative there. And so what did we do with that? We had multiple meetings, board meetings, where we reviewed and went over what the plans were, the pros, the cons, why we were doing it, and we told folks exactly what our alternate plans were and what some of the roadblocks were with some of our other ideas that we had tried to do. I had a couple community forums where we had parents and anybody who was interested in the community come to our Alverson Center where we went over the plan and then we created just a lot of time for open-ended discussion, so that you could come and have a space where there were administrators and folks could get their questions answered, because most of the time the pushback didn't have to do with the fact that we were cutting art or changing the special. It was that they had questions about the plan, they didn't know what the answer was, and maybe it was an impact to their specific kid. And so we created those opportunities for parents to talk to our administrators, and that was real successful. And so what came out of that, we developed a real robust art club, that meets after school, and kids who want art and like art now probably spend more time in the art club than they did when it was a special and they were only getting a forced 30 minutes once a week. So I think the key there is that we create opportunity for people to ask the questions that they have, and then we're not afraid to come up with alternative solutions if we find an area or a place that we overlooked, because sometimes we get our blinders on and we don't always see all the possibilities out there, even though we try to do our best. But sometimes there are great ideas that come from other folks, and I think you have to be willing to incorporate other things into your plans as you move forward.
Please describe what a visible and accessible superintendent looks like from your perspective.
Well, I'm not at a football game tonight, and I'm not selling 50/50 tickets, which I've done in the past at different games. I think a visible, and this is part of being accessible, is you got to go to stuff. You have to go to all the band performances. You got to go to the plays where you have kids participating. You have to go to the athletic events. You have to. I live about 3 miles from my office in the school district. We're on one campus. And so, though I'm not a big Walmart shopper, I go into the Walmart when I need things. That's our biggest store in Fowlerville. Tecumseh's a little bit bigger than that. I tend to go to Howell, to Meyer. I'm partial to Meyer. But that's how you get visible. I don't always like to do the shopping because I know when I go to Walmart or wherever in town, someone's going to be there and they're going to stop me and they're going to want to talk about things. But that's all part of the job, and that is one of the things that I enjoy about the position. I could tell you that I took my family out to Red Robin, and we're sitting there, and this, elementary-aged girl, I hear her elbow her mom and say, hey, Mom, that's the guy who owns my school. Because, and I've been called the president, too, sometimes, which is, kind of strange, but I go into, I've got a couple dates on my calendar. I go into 2 classrooms throughout the district every week, all year long. I think I've seen every teacher in my district teach at least 3 times now in the 6 years that I've been there. And so you would talk to kids in my district, and they'd know who I am. And they'd probably have a pretty good idea of what I do for the district, although they might not have the words yet in their vocabulary to use it. I'm an avid reader of books, and so most of the kids would tell you that I go to rooms and read Walter the Farting Dog with kids, not just in March, but throughout the year, because that's what I like to do. So that's how you become visible to your staff, to your kids, and to your parents. And when you're in those places, by nature, that makes you accessible, so that people can share thoughts and ideas with you and ask questions about just goofy things that happen in a school district. Another example might be I meet with every single teacher that we hire in our district, and I don't do it as an interview, so I'm not like the final interview. Principals and committees, they come up with their pool of candidates, they interview, they recommend that person to me. I sit down with them because I want them to know several things. Number one, our district isn't so big that they can't know who the superintendent is. Number two, they know where my office is at and that the door is open. So if they hear anything crazy out there, come see me, come ask me. I tell them what my phone number is to the direct line on my phone. You don't have to go through my secretary to get to me. And I do that because that's the kind of culture that I want in the district. I want people to know that regardless of where you're at in our district, the superintendent is approachable and accessible, because that's critical, I think, because that I would be the lead person who's really laying out the vision of the district and where we're moving forward, and those folks need to understand that piece, and we need to begin building a relationship. And I'm a family first guy, and we've had a lot of things happen. A wise man told me once in my career that 25% of our staff at any given time is going to be going through a rough time, and so as you deal with people, just keep that in mind. And so I like to think that we treat people with respect and dignity and do the best we can with them relative to the contracts that we have in place. But that's a culture thing, and going to events and being accessible is all part of it.
Okay. How have you invested in the communities you have worked in, and how would you do so here?
Well, I would assume you have a Rotary group. I would assume that you have, in Fowlerville, it's the Fowlerville Business Association. And so folks in those organizations would tell you that I'm an avid member of those groups. And we do projects all the time from, working in our community parks and planting trees, around Earth Day, and sitting in a dunk tank on a cold morning to raise money for our different organizations. So some of those organizations, those are things that I would continue to do here. I would, I'm not sure, I can't live in Fowlerville and drive an hour, 20 minutes to work every day. So what that move would look like to me, I'm not sure yet. I've got a wife who is certainly the better half. I'll just put that out there for folks. So if she comes, make sure you tell her I said that. But she works at Plymouth Canton School. She's an elementary principal there. And so and I don't have any kids at home anymore. And so when you take a look at just my life and where I'm at, we're empty nesters. She is a busy elementary principal, and I understand what the workload is there. And so I would have a lot of opportunity to still be, regardless of where I lived. You would never know if I stayed in Fowlerville or wherever, because you would see me here as part of the organizations here in Tecumseh. So that one is pretty easy. I'm just involved in a lot of things. I would even tell you I was on the fair board in Fowlerville. We've got the Fowlerville Family Fair, which I think is the longest running fair in the state of Michigan. And I was on their board for a couple years and helped out our kids. My kids were big into 4-H, so I know how to raise chickens and turkeys, and and now my wife was a city slicker, so living out in the country was a little bit of a challenge. But that one would be pretty easy. I've been down to your hardware store already, bought some parts for my house that I had to repair. That's just what I do, and I know my wife and I would want to come back and check out your Saturday morning farmer's market, because that looked pretty cool, something that we would have enjoyed going to. So we put in a new playground. I was there with a shovel, so doing those kinds of things are fun and easy. Generally there are kids, families, parents there, and those are just great projects. So you get involved with what your organizations are doing on your school campus. And now I've never done the 5K runs that they do all the time, but there are many other things that we do. I'm going to drive the book bus in our homecoming parade while my assistant throws candy out the door. So that's how you get involved.
Tell us what budget development process you use and how the process works to gain broad support for the final result.
So in the past 6 years, I'll say, I'm starting my 7th year. The goal of our board has always been to add a little bit to our fund balance every year, even if it's $1. Okay, so we've been able to go through contract negotiations and all of those types of things, and still maintain our priorities, and still 5 out of 6 years we ended the year in the black, maybe a dollar's worth in the black, but we moved it in the right direction and still maintain our priorities. So I've got an incredible finance director. Her name's Lori Coe. And when we're getting ready to do the budget, we take a look at what our budget priorities are relative to any changes to the budget that we want to do. And then her and I really take a look at what the state budget might be. You know, I was excited to see that maybe we're going to know what the foundation allowance is going to be here in the coming week or so. We've had our first pre-count, so we know our student count, and so we at least start to know the numbers of what our revenue might be. Prior to that, we've already put a budget in place that's included you know, all of the changes that we think we're going to see. Now, like I said, in our district, we've got a finance committee, and so we've taken our budgets, our initial budgets, to the finance committee. If this board doesn't have that structure, then those budget projections would come to the full board, and we would have conversations around what those changes look like and what we think our assumptions are going into the year. And we would develop an original budget from there that we would get adopted by June 30, just like all boards throughout the state need to do. So we don't start from scratch every year. We take a look at what our old budget was. We look at all of the assumptions, any changes to the positive or to the negative. We go from there in terms of trying to make the most balanced budget that we can. We do 2 or 3 budget revisions throughout the course of the school year so that we can capture any major changes that happen throughout the year. You know, one year we had to buy a couple more buses than we had budgeted for, and you know, different things like that happen. So Lori Coe and I really work hand in hand on that budget. We take those numbers to our finance committee and then to the full board, and we get approval for the budget. So and we go from there. So.
Tell us how you have demonstrated transparency in your previous roles.
Well, you know, transparency is, you know, you have to tell people really what you're doing. And so, you know, how do you tell someone you're being transparent? Well, one, you got to trust me that I'm telling you the whole truth. And I think that's the key thing, you know. So for me, you know, I don't even know if I can come up with a specific example on something that would show I'm being transparent, because I think you're either transparent or you're not. You know, I mean, I'm pretty black and white when it comes to something being ethical, not ethical, truthful, not truthful. I mean, those are all you know, pretty deep lines in the sand for me. And so transparency is just being about, and you know, you say you're going to do something and you do it, you follow through with it. And so I think you would need to, you know, talk to folks that I work with and you know, see if I'm transparent to them. What I can tell you here is that I'm honest. I'm going to tell people the facts and the truth, and even if it's not good information that people want to hear. You know, we've had some testing irregularities in the past, you know, and the call always comes to me and well, Wayne, you know, what do you want to do? I say, report the irregularity, you know, because that's being truthful, honest, and transparent to me. So that, you know, I'm not sure there's one action that you can say, hey, I do this because I'm transparent. I think that's how people, you either operate transparently or you don't. And I think if you look at my background and my past, people would tell you that I operate that way and tell the truth.
Tell us about the expectations you create for staff. What are they? What factors do you consider in setting and communicating those expectations?
Could you say the second half of that one more time, Mr. Simpson?
Yep. What are the expectations and what factors do you consider in setting and communicating the expectations?
You know, in our district, you know, I've said this before. Our district is all about relationships. We don't necessarily focus on test scores per se. We think that if we build great relationships with our kids and our staff and amongst each other, then everything else kind of takes care of itself. You know, so that's my beginning premise. So, you know, what are my expectations with staff? Is that all staff, and I communicate this yearly in our welcome back breakfast at the beginning of the year. You know, this year we had a lot of new hires, you know, so I made it a point to really reinforce this family thinking and talking to parents and communicating with folks. You know, I essentially told our young teachers who were there and other new staff and other departments that this is what we believe. We believe in developing and building relationships. You know, that's gonna be number one above all else. And if you have a question on what that looks like, then I want you to go to the veteran staff that are there in our district, because they'll tell you and they'll show you what it is. And so that starts to develop our culture, you know, where we can you know, really make families first and kids first, and so I express it there, and I hope that all of the other folks in our district, you know, really carry that and provide that culture support for our new folks. How do I communicate it? I choose themes, you know, throughout the course of the year. Being an old coach kind of person, you know, I think people can rally around themes for a school year, much like you might see in an elementary building. They're really good at developing themes. And so I'll send out emails to the whole staff throughout the course of the year, articles that I find that support our themes, and you know, whether it's teamwork, communication with families, leaving a legacy for you know, for the kids and students, just to kind of remind folks throughout the course of the year on what's important. You know, I told you about taking our staff appreciation gifts, and you know, it would be reinforced in the theme there as well. And so you know, so I communicate you know, personally via email, and every chance I get. A couple of years ago, literacy, all in for literacy was our theme, and so every chance I got, from our sporting events to any other time administrators got staff together, we were reinforcing all in for literacy as our theme, and you know, that was effective.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so we're gonna jump ahead here. So, but Wayne, I have one other question. Why Tecumseh Schools? And you've had such a long career in Flowerville. Why are you wanting to make a move at this point? It looks like you've had a pretty good career in Flowerville. I'm going off the script here a little bit. So, but first off, why Tecumseh, and why are you looking to make a move right now?
Well, if you know, I'll say a funny thing first. So if you really looked at my career, I've been at every district twice throughout the course of my career. Now it'd be kind of cool to end my career maybe where I started my career.
Okay.
You know, I think would be kind of neat. But that's a great question. So, you know, I just start and say that you know, I'm at a good point in my career. You know, I think that when your last daughter goes off to college and you're an empty nester and your wife works, down in this area a little bit, it's a good opportunity for a move. I would tell you that in Fowlerville, we've developed systems there which are outstanding. I could be gone tomorrow and they wouldn't miss a beat. And they'll hire a superintendent and they'll move along. I think there's a great challenge here. In the last year, Tecumseh, hasn't been positively portrayed in any of the newspapers, and I just came back from the superintendent's conference, and that was an interesting conference, and a lot of conversation up there as well. So why Tecumseh? Well, I think I'm looking for a challenge in my career. I am re-energized thinking about coming here and having an opportunity to work with the board, work with staff. I think some tremendous things have happened in the district relative to your past traditions and your rich history. It's a great district. It would be a challenge for me to come here and work with you, and that excites me, to be truthful. I will be honest and tell you that it would be a raise for me to come here, and as I'm looking at the end of my career, I've been at it for 31 years. My wife's working 9 more years, so I'm in it for a while yet. I'm not ready to retire, and so I am in a position that I want to position myself to be able to retire, and this could help do that as well, to be truthful. But I'm really looking for a challenge in a place that I know has great opportunity. I love communities where the school is the center of the community. It's much like Fowlerville. We still have access to a lot of things, but the school is the center. And I think it would be pretty exciting to come here. So that's why. I'm just at that juncture in my life where I'm looking for a good challenge, and I think there are real good people here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is our last interview of the night. We appreciate your interest coming in and interviewing with us. We're going to meet here, and Donna will be in contact if we want to interview you again.
Great.
So,
Well,
thank you.
very much.
Are we interviewing you now?
No. Work through that.
All right.
I'd like to think we know each other well enough. Let me just kind of lay out the landscape of what we're going to do. So next steps would be that we will, just talk a little bit, just debrief. You don't, like I said, I told you before, you don't need to speak. Every board member does not need to speak about every single candidate that we've interviewed. But I would like to walk through each of the candidates, and those of you who feel like making a few remarks, strengths or concerns, whatever makes sense to you. I'd like to talk through each of the 6 candidates. After we're done with that, I'd like us to talk about seriously inviting 2 of those candidates back to Tecumseh so we can get to know them better. I'd like to describe this kind of as we just had a cup of coffee, now we're trying to figure out who we want to take out to lunch. It's no more serious than that. I don't want you to make a decision until you're comfortable doing so. As you talk about the candidates, now is also a good time to weave in some of the feedback that you received when you made phone calls about candidates. So, any questions before we get started?
Can we pick 3?
Well, so in case everybody couldn't hear, so the question is, can we pick 3? Of course you can. If you choose to do that, you certainly can. Here's what I want you to have a realistic understanding of. So from the very beginning, I encouraged you to think about it's better to leave more doors open than fewer as you move forward in this process. So as long as you're serious about all 3 of those, then it's the right thing to do. We just have to think about what our next day together looks like. So we have Wednesday on the calendar for second round interviews. Usually for second round interviews, at the very least, I'd like to see those finalists come to the district. I like to see them interact with staff, tour the district, have kind of an open house format where those finalists are in the same room but kind of on opposite sides, and the public can come in and just kind of visit with them, you know, have lemonade and a cookie and just kind of get a sense of who they are as people before we move into those second round interviews. Now, right now, those second round interviews are scheduled for 5 p.m. We could certainly move those later in the evening, and we'll talk about what the structure of that interview looks like. But I share all that with you to say, you know, it's a pretty busy day. As I understand it, your interim superintendent is on vacation next week. So that means we're gonna need to lean on some other key staff members to think about, you know, what the tours of the district look like, et cetera. None of that is a cause for concern. Whatever it is, you know, we can design a day of interaction that makes sense, but I want you to know, and I also want the audience to have some sense of where this is going. So if that's the case, when we get to that point in the conversation, I would ask that we still, you know, usually I would still have you identify 2, and if 3 come to the top, that's fine, but it doesn't mean that every board member has to identify 3. Right now, let's just walk through what we thought of them, if that's okay, and we'll start with our first interview, who was Rick Hilderly.
Can I make a comment first?
Sure.
I just want to apologize for not being here last night. I had an obligation at work that I could not get out of. It was scheduled months in advance with one of my biggest distributors in Detroit. They had an open house. And, but I did read all of the, Terry and Becky both sent me all of the feedback, and I read every single one of them, and I did listen to all 3 interviews. So, just wanted to
You're
tell you,
feeling well prepared.
I tried to get as caught up as I could.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Okay, can I start?
Sure.
Okay, I think that Rick Hildery is his previous experience in Tecumseh is very helpful, and I think he could mend some fences. I've looked over the feedback we got. We got 22 feedbacks. Of them, 9 had no concerns. 7 were concerned with his previous, work in Tecumseh. 13 say previous Tecumseh history was a positive. So
Thank you.
I'm in line with him.
Other perspectives?
I think Rick is very passionate about wanting to come back and work here.
Can you speak up?
Can't hear.
I'm sorry.
Speak into the microphone.
I said, I think Rick is very passionate about his wanting to come back and work in Tecumseh.
Thank you.
Well, I knew Rick worked here. I'd never met him before. I knew who he looked like, and because I saw him at the middle school a few times, but I'd never spoken to him before. So I spoke to,
No.
huh? What? I spoke to an individual from Bronson that has quite a few dealings with him, and they said that he was very collaborative. Rick talked about in his interview that he let a principal go, but he didn't relay what happened after that, because I guess there was some concern inside that building that they were having issues with the principal, and that teachers were concerned that it was coming from Rick, that Rick was sending it down through the principal, and so what happened was that they let the principal go, and Rick up and moved his office into that school to work with those teachers and get their confidence back and so forth. I found that pretty interesting. This person also told me that he has a very calm personality, that he also, when he first got to Bronson, he rode all the buses to meet the kids and find out where they lived and learn more about the area. So I thought that was interesting as well. And as I'm speaking with this person, I could tell they were getting a little emotional because they asked for us not to take him away. So, and their voice was breaking up a little bit, so I thought that was pretty interesting, so.
Thank you. So, and like Mr. Simpson, I didn't know Rick. I guess my daughter had him at some point, and I had asked her if she knew him, and she said yes, and she said she liked him. I also had him assigned to me as a reference to follow up on one of his references, I should say. And the person I spoke to was a business owner in that area. So they didn't really have direct school knowledge, but they also conveyed that based on what they did know of him, that they felt that it would be a loss to the community if he were chosen and left their community. He described him as being able to assess a situation and be very diplomatic about it. He likes to drive input from all sources before he makes that decision, which I think is important. I asked for 3 of his strongest qualities, and this person told me that he had great approachability, he was a very good listener, and he balanced his options before presenting, thought things through before he brought it out there. So that was the feedback that I had gotten about this candidate. That's what I know.
One other thing I forgot to add to here is that this person also said that he listens to teachers and has them designing and aligning the curriculum throughout the district currently, so.
Thank you. Are you comfortable moving on to the second candidate then, Mr. Ben Williams? Incidentally, I did have someone send me that Facebook post, I know the board knows this, but the public doesn't. So there was a Facebook post that was kind of captured out there that I thought perhaps was from him, and that was not from him. So just to make that clear, if you were somebody that saw that post, that was a different Ben William, not Williams. Thank you.
With me, he came across, he'd be, I think, too authoritative to work in this district right now. I don't think he would mend the fences. I think he comes across to me, he's the boss.
Thank you. Other perspectives?
I really liked Hilderly, and then when Ben came up, I liked his background and his experience, and I was thinking if we could mold those two, that would be our perfect candidate. So I don't know how far you can take this, if you can just,
I don't have that.
okay. I thought his experience, his background, his education, everything was what I had in mind at the beginning. My only concern, and it was the same concern I read in a lot of the evals, is I'm not sure he gives the warm fuzzies that we need. You know, we need somebody approachable, somebody, and I feel like he is approachable. I almost feel like we didn't get,
Yeah, that's tough in a first interview.
I almost feel like we didn't get that side of him in this interview, because based on some of his answers, you know, he also rode the bus. He also did a lot of things that were more community focused. So I feel like he is approachable and he is visible. I think he just came off as very just authoritative in the interview.
Thank you. Any other perspective?
I would say he's in a rough school district. I'm from Trenton, and I'm not far from Taylor when I grew up, and I know what that district is like. He probably has to be a little more authoritative in that district to survive.
And he's done some heavy lifting there, for sure.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I have reached out to some teachers in Saline, and what John has said, he is kind of the authoritative type, is from what I got from some teachers in Saline. So,
Thank you.
and very data-driven, very data-driven. So.
Other perspective, or shall we move on to our third candidate?
Well, I'll contribute that my personal process might be different than the other board members, might be the same. I spent hours on each of the 6 candidates, researching them as much as I could electronically, making phone calls, calling people who knew people who might know something, putting information together. And I would have to echo that Rick Hilderly, by and large, I think his drive to come back to the district, the attachment he feels to it, is a plus on his side. Mr. Williams, I think, is very focused on identifying weak areas through data, through testing, through any evidence he can find of the weak area, and attacking the weak area to elevate it, make improvements. The research that I did into Mr. Williams suggests that I think there might be, he might be less personable than what we're looking for the district. Just his personality might be a little bit more black and white, data driven. Of course, it's hard to tell from researching, but that's the indication I get, is he's very focused on the data and very focused on a silo style of management hierarchy rather than a intellectual collaborative approach.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to talk about our third interview with Scott Leach and his candidacy.
I think it's just too small of a district and not enough
Pardon me?
too small of a district, not enough background, not enough experience.
I'd have to agree.
And I don't know how big that district is, but it's got to be much smaller than ours, and to lose, to have an ongoing issue with losing students and to lose 100 students this year is pretty significant.
Thank you. Additional perspectives?
I think the district he's in right now offered him the opportunity to step up from a building administrator to a district administrator. I also think that the district he stepped into might be a greater challenge than he anticipated, and he's definitely looking to reduce the challenge, I will say. I think his personality lends to be an excellent building principal, and probably on a personal level to connect with people. I'm not sure with his experience if he's quite what we're needing in the organizational structure we need here.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our fourth candidate, Jim Baker.
I'd like to, but I have some concerns that he's got a lot of experience, but he appears to have changed positions about every 2 years.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think over his 19-year career, he's had 10 different jobs or something like that. So that's a big concern of mine. And it just doesn't seem like he's been stable anywhere. And it's kind of, some of them lateral moves, some of them been, a little bit up moves, but it's been just too many moves for me. So I just don't feel, I think he interviewed great. I think he's got some great ideas. I wrote some of them down to steal some of them. But I think it's just too much moving around, and it concerns me.
I think his the depth of knowledge that he demonstrated and the experience that he demonstrated while interviewing, and certainly on paper, he has the experience and the knowledge. And if we were looking for a interim for a year or two, I don't think I'd have a qualm with that. But I do have concerns with the short terms of employment, and I can see sometimes in his history why it was. But I'm not sure I'm willing to take the chance in our district. I think I'm looking to get somebody on board here who's going to be a little bit longer term without that question in the back of anybody's mind on a daily basis.
Thank you.
He was one of my favorites on paper before we did any of these interviews, just because of his background and experience. The jumping around concerns me a little bit, but not enough to disqualify him. I think one of the things that he said during the interview was that, he was constantly looking for something different or going up the ladder, which he did most times. There were a few times where they were not up moves. But the thing that he said tonight that helped me get past that was that he said he would retire here. So, I believe so, isn't that what he said?
Yes.
He said he would retire here, so for me at least, those consistent moves would not, I was actually looking for that answer. We didn't have a question that asked that, but he said he would retire here. So I guess the bigger question is that going to be in 2 years? Is it gonna be, but he said his wife's going to work for another 10, I think,
Nine.
9 years. So, you know, I think that we would get.
With Rodell?
That was
Yeah.
Oh,
Rodell.
Rodell, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
There's a lot going through my head. Anyways, his wife's at South Lyon as a super.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. But I think the retiring here means that he's planning on finding a move where he can settle. He may not have settled for years, but I think he's finally looking for that final move. So the jumping around,
So I want to just lay that out, and it doesn't matter to me who you bring back, right? If I have a grave concern, I'm gonna tell you that, So this is a case of about a year in Battle Creek Lakeview as assistant superintendent, right? So he talked about why he went there. He went there from DPS because when VD came in, he brought his administrators from his previous district in Florida. So the DPS to Lakeview is crystal clear as far as why that transition happened. Huron Valley to DPS is what he talked to you about, which was, I had this great opportunity, I wouldn't have given up. It was pretty challenging, paraphrasing, right? I mean, he said a lot more than that. Huron Valley was 4 years as superintendent, 2 years as assistant superintendent in the same district. We had some confusion about that in our first round of who we were bringing. Remember when we had that conversation? So I just want to be clear, because sometimes how they lay it out on a resume is hard to follow. So that takes care of, 9 or 10 years for me, as far as.
I went through the comedy, starting with the very beginning of his career, after he was
Yep.
a police officer.
Yep.
And it was 2 years, it was 2 years, it was 2 years, it was
Yep.
2 years, And I'd have an answer for that question too at the end if I was coming to another district to tell them that, yeah, I'm gonna be around a while, but his history doesn't show that.
Yeah, I wanted to just make clear about the tail end of that, Mike, thank you.
Well, I think he interviewed really well. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, definitely.
Oh, yeah, I like what he said.
But we are a bedroom community. This is a family community. His wife is, when you see the superintendent, you usually see the spouse, and it's gonna be hard for that to happen, and for him to dedicate a lot of time in this community where he's got to also dedicate time there, his wife's got to dedicate time here. I think, this is a bedroom community, and it's a small community, and people want to see that hometown, and I do too, so.
Thank you.
I
And it's not like
personally,
South Line's right next door.
yeah,
Well, South Line's 40 minutes.
40
I
minutes.
know where it is.
yeah, I personally, was really turned off about the moves, and I thought, I pretty much had my mind made up, I won't like this person. But he had me from the very beginning. He's very knowledgeable, very well-spoken, very approachable. We don't know if any candidate's gonna stay here for 2 years or 4 years, or if we'll even want them to once they actually get here, because it's different when they actually start working. I was kind of leaning towards an outside candidate that had nothing to do with Tecumseh, just because of the situation, we've been through and we're in. I really liked him. I thought he could do a great job here.
Thank you.
And whether it's 3 years or 6 years, a great job in 3 years is a great job in 3 years.
I did call one of his references, and it's someone that he's worked with in different roles throughout his career. Somebody that, they've worked together as a team in multiple roles. And one of the word that he kept using was collaboration. That's a big piece of it. The other part of it was that he's extremely calm and doesn't take things personally. So whenever there was a situation where there was animosity or a difficult, anything, he would always bring him in to calm the situation. He said he always wants a win-win. He's got a lot of negotiations with unions, very approachable. This gentleman even said if he was hired as superintendent here, this guy would come down and work for him. That's the relationship that they have and how much he believes in him. But yeah, I mean, I think his collaboration was the big word that he used throughout his discussions with him, and that he would be a calming influence to the district.
Thank you.
I think too, if we look at his moves, I mean, I think most of them were, he was invited, they wanted him to come up because they knew he could help them. And I think that's why he's at his current job,
That, he said that.
because they wanted help and they knew that he wouldn't be there long because he wanted to be back as a superintendent.
Thank
So
you.
I'm not concerned about the moves.
Thank you. Are you comfortable moving on to Mr. McNatt, to Sean McNatt now? I don't want to rush you, but.
I think there's too much local,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, involved to even think about it.
Well, I think there may be some questions to be asked. I think his primary motivation is to move 7 miles from his home. There's no question about that.
And I didn't get a lot of clear answers, honestly. I mean,
I didn't feel like you wanted to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get much interest, so we can move on.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk about our last interview, candidate Wayne Rodell.
I liked Wayne. I called his reference. The person I called was very excited to talk about him, and he actually came across as what I would expect. He said that if you go to Fowlerville, you can stop anybody in the street. They know who he is. They don't want us to take him from him. And he's a problem solver. He works with everybody. He works good with the ISD. He works good with all the departments in his school. He says that he's loved over there. He said his strongest qualities are his people skills, his goal setting, his achievement, and his dedication to his position.
Thank you.
I also spoke with one of his references, and he said he was very collaborative, included everyone. He's got a great personality, encourages, great sense of humor, works well with the board. This individual happened to be a retired superintendent, and he said I would hire him on the spot. He says, I asked him why the reasons of leaving, and he said it's looking for a challenge, physical location because of his wife, and he admitted that. And I thought he interviewed great. He's been in Flowerville for since 2003, so he's got stability. He's somebody that hasn't jumped around a lot, and I think he interviewed really well. I think he likes the teacher-driven approach for curriculum and getting everybody involved, the building principals in his interview, getting teachers involved, and I liked him a lot. So,
Thank you.
I liked him. I thought he was good. I liked him on paper before they got here, and I thought he interviewed well. I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I thought his approach was good. I think his approach to problem solving and curriculum, all the things that we're looking for, he can bring to us. So I liked him.
Yeah, the reference I talked to also, would you rehire this kid? He says, I'm not in a position to rehire him, but he said, I definitely don't want to see him leave Fowlerville.
I thought he did a great job too, and had a lot of great experience and seemed very approachable.
You really saw in the breadth of the 6 candidates that you interviewed, a lot of diversity in
Yeah.
personality and how much experience they had, where that experience came from. I mean, you really could see that in their interviews, I thought. Any other just sort of commentary or perspective before we talk about, who we might want to bring back for second round?
Well, I'd like to say, I'll let the cat out of the bag. The forms, the impressions that everybody filled out and turned in, there wasn't a lot of diversity in there. Everybody saw the same weaknesses. Everybody saw the same strengths. And there are a lot of what we were writing down up here. It kind of echoed what we were seeing. I felt good to get that affirmation from the people out there. It helps to reinforce what you're thinking and seeing. I'll also say that during the interview, exactly what they were saying, the facts of it, the narrative was probably less important to me than how they carried themselves. If they were reciting something that was obviously well rehearsed to fit it into a question somewhere, or whether they were talking like I do, which is rather poorly in public because I'm thinking as I'm speaking. It says something if you're thinking about what you're saying and thinking about the question and answering it. It feels like a more genuine answer than things that are rehearsed. So that does go into the decision-making a little bit, because you have to take an interview with a grain of salt. Every one of them, if they did what they're supposed to, they researched us, and you know there was a little bit of pandering in there. They're supposed to be.
Right, they wouldn't get the job if they were,
Right.
abrasive. Okay, so right before we got the ball rolling in our conversation tonight, there was this, hey Donna, can we talk about bringing 3 back instead of 2? I don't know that I heard that in your overall feedback, but I could be misreading you. I wonder if you're comfortable starting each of you by just giving me 2 names, and let's see how, it's nothing but a softball, you're not held to it. And for the public to understand, there's no need for the board to be in agreement right now. This isn't a case of if they're not all on the same page, they're not doing their job right. This is literally making the sausage in public, right? They really need to hear each other's thinking, talk through the issues, and so it isn't a reflection of your ability to govern the district if you're not all on the same page at this point. By the time we get to the end, we need to get there, but that's not where we need to be right now today. So you tell me, 2 or 3.
Well, before we go there, can we talk about the contract status?
We can. Greg, would you mind doing that?
Sure. Rick Hilderly.
Why don't you borrow someone's microphone, please?
I don't bite. Not today.
Mr. Hilderly, his contract expires June 30 of 2021. Mr. Williams on June 30 of 2021. Mr. Leach on June 30 of 2020. Mr. Baker on June 30 of 2021. Mr. McNatt on June 20 of 2020. And Mr. Rodell on June 30th of 2022.
Do you know if any of those have been extended? Any of those contracts like a year or 2 years or anything? Do you know any of that?
I can speak to the general premise of it. So those ones that expire in 20 have not been extended. They're not all the same structure, right? So Mr. McNatt's was an evergreen, which means the board had to take action to prevent it. If the board didn't take action, it would auto-renew. We actually don't recommend that anymore, just so you know. So in his case, the board took action to put that on hold. That was what I had asked him to address, and he addressed with you before he began.
Right.
And then with Mr. Leach, right, they chose not to extend it, right? So in that case, they would have taken action to extend if they were going to do that. The rest of them have been, right, extended, but it's 1 year at a time, except for Mr. Rodell's, which is a little longer, which makes sense for a long-serving superintendent. They probably don't want to lose him, so that's why his is more than the standard 3-year.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm okay giving 2 just to start,
We good with that?
Yeah.
and just see where we end up.
The
If we
important
end up
thing
with
is you
3,
all give me the same number, otherwise it gets wonky, right? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and ask the president to start, if you don't mind them.
I'm just giving you 1 or 2.
2, please.
Okay. Rick Hilderly and Wayne Rodell.
Thank you,
I'd echo that.
thank you,
And I also, Hilderly and Rodell.
thank you,
Hilderly and Baker.
thank you,
Baker and Rodell.
thank you,
Baker and Rodell.
thank you.
Hillary and Rodell.
I'm sorry for the last one. I didn't hear you.
Hillary and Rodell.
So that means, I'm gonna read this out loud, and, if you disagree, let me know, but I'm reading off the chart here. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Hilderly, 1, 2, 3 for Baker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for Rodell. So it seems, apparent that we should be talking about bringing back Mr. Hilderly and Mr. Rodell. I think what's in question is, should we also bring back Mr. Baker?
I think we definitely should.
I don't think we should. I don't.
So I just want to make sure I heard you.
I think that when you look at people on paper, and like you were saying, he looks good on paper, he doesn't look good, but he moved a lot, or he said too many big words or whatever. I just think the more you dig deeper, the more you see that person. I mean, I was convinced I wasn't gonna like him just because he moved around a lot, but then when I got here, I really was impressed, and I would like to hear more from him, and I think he could have a lot to offer, and he lives, he's gonna be living on the lake 20 miles from here or whatever, and it's gonna be his last job, and I think he would benefit our community.
Thank you. Other
It's at least
perspective?
worth a look. I don't think we should just disregard it,
I hear you.
but that's my opinion.
Other perspectives?
I think his experience is huge. I mean, and when we originally sat down and discussed this process, we said two things. We wanted someone from outside of the district, and we wanted someone with superintendent experience. And I think that he brings both those two things, those were our two main points. I mean, Rick is kind of an anomaly because he technically is from the district, but I think he brings a lot of things that we need today. But we can't overlook the fact that we really need somebody who has union negotiation experience, collaborative experience, who has, a teacher-focused curriculum experience, data experience. I mean, he's seen it in all sizes and districts.
Thank you.
He ended up high on the list too, as far as how the recommendations came in.
Well, I'll confess that I am conflicted. He interviewed very well. There's no question about that. His experience, no question. I professionally, his experience and the knowledge he demonstrated while here, I was very comfortable with. And I can see where it makes sense that he would have a short term in one district. It is a hard hurdle for me to get past because one of the things in my mind that I looked at was I wanted somebody who showed a history of staying in one place for a very long time. So they would probably come here and stay a very long time. This is a process I hope that we would have to go through as a board at this moment and not have to revisit in the near future. And there's doubt in the back of my mind about that, uncertainty. So I am a little conflicted on it.
So would you like to drill down a little more in a second interview?
I don't want to exclude either of the other two. If we're going to bring back three,
Yeah, the
then
question would be
then by
bring
all
three.
then by all means, if we're bringing back three, then I would definitely put Baker as my third.
And I struggled between Rodell and Baker, honestly. I think bringing Rick back makes sense for what we need and what I saw in the evaluations and everything else. But when I had to pick one between Baker and Rodell, I picked Baker because of the experience. But I think Rodell also has experience, and I would hate to not bring him. So personally, I think we need all three.
Well, I'm going to, usually I try to have kind of a soft touch in this, because I don't live here.
You're going hard this time, though, are you?
Kind of.
I have one more thought we need to
Yes, sir.
consider. Now, he said he's got a few years that he plans to retire here. But the truth of the matter is, with most superintendents, any of these we're talking to, it's 5 years or less is what a superintendent spends in a district. So Rodell is kind of the exception, that he has as many years in a district as he has.
That's what
That's
I was
very
thinking.
Good point, Mike.
So, but here's the other piece of this, which is what I was just gonna surface. even though it's gonna be kind of a pain for scheduling, it probably is prudent to bring 3 back. Because one of the pivotal issues here is Hilderly's familiarity with the district, right? So that's a huge plus and a huge negative, and let me explain why I'm saying a huge negative. Because when we did the stakeholder input, you know, the survey piece of it, so many people were like, ooh, an outsider. I'm not, it is completely normal in a search process that at the beginning of it, people are like, we want an outsider, and at the end of it, they're like, ooh, we saw outsiders and they were scary. Now we want people we know. Happens in every search. But keeping a third person in the mix does keep your options open and allows you more time to shake that out with your public. I mean, quite honestly. There's a good chance he's gonna watch this video and say, no, thank you. You know, I mean, having heard all of your comments, like, that's a real thing. So I would say it probably does behoove us to just figure it out and bring all 3 back if it's something that, you know, you're willing to indulge, and if not, I obviously respect the will of the board. Either way, a motion is probably in order.
I think it's, the first round interviews are difficult in that we have no follow-up questions. So that makes it hard to kind of ascertain more information. I think all of us at some point was like, oh, I want to ask more. So I think it would help us probably if we, I would hate to exclude someone and we drill down on the other 2 and go, oh my God, I bet the other one was better. So I agree. I think let's do 3. Let's go ahead and drill down on a few more points with those 3
Is
and
that a
see
motion?
where we all land.
Well, with that, I'll introduce a motion.
Hey,
That
thank
we
you.
bring back Hilderly, Baker, and Rodell for a second interview.
I second that.
Any discussion?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Let's talk a minute before, I know everybody's tired, but let's talk a minute about this next round. So we'll, you know, we're working already on what does Wednesday look like during the day. But I want to talk with you about, you know, for second round, here's what I definitely want to see happen, and then I want to ask you about some extra pieces. So I'd like to see you spend about another 45 minutes just board interaction, and at least 15 minutes of questions that the audience can submit and the board president will ask, okay? That recipe works really well. That's about an hour of time. My question to you is, do you want to see these folks do a presentation? And before you react to that, understand that this person is gonna represent you, right? Gonna represent the district. So sometimes it's important to kind of see how they handle an issue and how they just kind of own a room in that situation, a non-conversational situation. Or is there some
What
other
do you
kind
mean a
of?
presentation?
We give them a project,
We give them a project, they all get the same project. I'm gonna tell you, there is already an imbalance, because Hilderly's gonna know a whole lot more about Tecumseh than the other 2 are. And so you have to be mindful of that kind of built-in bias to this. So I'd have to be pretty strategic in what assignment we gave them. But if that's.
To make it fair.
As fair as possible.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you know, yeah, 2 decades in
Fair.
the district, you know, it's kind of hard to.
With what, 5 or 10 minute presentation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say shorter is better, so 5 to 7 minutes, and then you have the opportunity to follow up on a couple questions if you choose to. You can say no, and that gives you more time for that natural conversation, but I wanted
I
you
like that.
I like it
to
too.
think about it.
I like that.
I like natural conversation, but.
I like both.
I'd like
I like both.
Yeah, I like both too, but we don't have time.
Well, she just said
You'll
we
have,
do.
you're gonna have that interaction.
Okay.
You know, you're gonna have 45 minutes of that no matter what.
Okay.
So that's not, we wouldn't get rid of that, and you will have the opportunity for follow-up questions, and the questions will not all be the same.
Okay.
So this will be a case of, you know, I'll send you an email with instructions about next step, but
Okay.
these questions will be much more based on the strengths and the potential challenges for the individual folks that you've brought forward.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like you're okay with a short presentation.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
When they do the interaction like during the day, they're not all 3 here at the same time, are they?
Well,
It's like an open
3 is
house.
the whole challenge, so they might be, but it's
Oh.
okay, they're all grown-ups.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, really.
I don't know.
If
They were
don't
all
play-
just at MASA together.
If they don't play nice together, we
Yeah,
can
and
eliminate
so
one.
it's gonna be a little difficult, and they might all
Litmus
be.
test.
So we'll,
I just wondered how that would work.
it's fine. There's no arm wrestling or anything like, it's not a cage match, it'll be fine. But we'll have to figure that out. They will definitely all be in the same room for any kind of open house situation, that's for sure. Good question. The other thing, I just want to check in then on is hard start time. Now that you have 3, we really need that 5 o'clock start time. It'll be hard to find flexibility in that. Okay, so that's just gonna be a later night, so, you know, we should just plan accordingly. Okay. Anybody have any particular passion about what the topic is of the presentation?
I have a question.
What?
Where will the meeting be?
The interviews?
Like
Where will the
Wednesday
meet-
night meeting? You know,
In here?
Do you mean the open house
No.
or the meeting?
the actual
Quick,
meeting.
we're doing this.
The
Yeah, 'cause
second
we're gonna have a lot more people.
Yeah, I think we should do second interviews in here if we can, just because we had such a hard time with audio in the other room.
Right.
There's a lot of empty seats here.
Well, yeah, we can push that roll up a little bit and put more chairs.
Well, and we could probably curve this a little bit and allow a little more space there if we needed more chairs. What do you think? Are you concerned about that, Terry?
No, I was just thinking.
Just postings, we gotta
Yeah, we
post
gotta
it.
post it.
Yeah, now as far as the open house, we might be better off doing that in the cafeteria,
Okay.
because it's close by, proximity-wise, so we'll work that out.
Okay.
Okay, anybody want to suggest something for the topic?
Are we supposed to be at the open house too?
That's optional for board
Okay.
members. Sometimes board members like to come to watch the candidates and how they conduct themselves. That's entirely up to you because it'll be pretty early.
Do we have any OMA issues with that?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
Just want to make sure.
Are you kidding me? I mean, I work for MASB.
We've got a clean slate so
We're
far.
really serious about the Open Meetings Act at MASB. Pride Monastic would kill me.
So
All right.
what would the framework for their homework project be? Normally, is it a framework around the school administration policy, or is it state standardized testing? What presentation?
Curriculum,
Yeah, I've
Whatever we
had
feel
districts,
like?
I've had districts do all kinds. I like it to keep it to something that all board members can relate to. In other words, you know, not something that's too niche or too technical. I know that you have done a lot of research in the last several years, so you're, you know, pretty sharp on those items. And like I said, I think it's important that we pick a topic that doesn't play too strong to the candidate, that has kind of an inside baseball view of Tecumseh.
What about a vertical approach to curriculum?
No, how about just how do you align your curriculum in the schools? So, it's not all about.
Can we just ask that question?
Well, I think all of them talked
Yeah, they did.
about
Yep, sure
vertical
did.
approaches. So they all, I mean, they're all familiar with that concept.
How do you feel about, because they talked about that a little bit today, and part of it is I think you need to gel on, you have to understand that these folks have been trained in best practice in curriculum, and it doesn't always jive. Like, I was watching you react to some of them, and because of what's happened here, some of what you believe may not be consistent with what they've actually been taught. So there's a conversation. I think that's better as a conversation than as a presentation.
How about on like the new third grade reading laws? There we go.
Yeah.
And the
What do you think?
implementation in the district? Something that broad, it's
It could
non-district
be.
specific?
You could do that. You could do something on what would your plan of entry be, so everybody can kind of hear it. You did get some plans of entry today.
That's not super exciting.
The plan of entry or the third grade reading law?
Third grade reading law.
But it is pertinent to the district.
It is pertinent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we should do the plan of entry just because it's, then you're gonna have to commit to like, how would they actually approach it if they got the job? And there's some accountability in that, like, hey, you stood in the public meeting and said this is how you were gonna do it. Right?
I like it.
All right. Anything else?
All right, I think our work is done here tonight.
Good work.
Yep, so, thank you for everyone for coming, we appreciate it. And, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
There we go. And we're done.
I, oh.